Ever wonder why the fridge light turns off exactly when you close the door, even though you know it was just on? Or how a traffic jam magically appears out of nowhere? Get ready to untangle your brain with 3 hours of everyday mysteries that have no easy answers, designed to melt away your stress and leave you in a state of tranquil contemplation. Let's starts with first, the empty inbox illusion. In the quiet glow of a screen, there is a peculiar kind of ritual. You open your inbox, glance at the flood of messages, and begin the process of clearing them. Each reply, each deletion, each categorization feels like a step toward order, toward a sense of completion. You imagine the reward waiting at the end, an inbox that is perfectly empty, a blank slate, a rare silence in the digital noise. And for a brief moment, you might achieve it. You stare at the clean screen and feel the strange satisfaction of nothingness. But then it happens. A new message slips in. Another demand, another pull of attention, another signal that the void you thought you created was never yours to keep. The illusion shatters. The empty inbox was only a pause, a trick of perception. Completion was never permanent. This is the empty inbox illusion, a loop as endless as breath. It whispers to us about more than emails. It reflects the way life itself resists finality. Every time we sweep one corner clean, another corner gathers dust. Every time we finish one task, another silently cues itself behind the curtain. We live in a cycle of arrivals. The more we chase the dream of done, the more we feel its impossibility. Think of the moments you've promised yourself peace after a single achievement. You told yourself, once the inbox is clear, I'll rest. Once the project is submitted, I'll relax. Once the bills are paid, I'll finally feel calm. But notice what always follows. The inbox fills again. The next project lands on your desk. The next bill appears in the mail. The cycle continues, as though the universe has designed existence to deny the concept of finished. What is truly completed? Even the body, when it sleeps, must rise again. Even the heart, when it rests between beats, must contract once more. Completion is a mirage we chase in the desert of time. Consider the psychology behind this. Our brains are wired to crave closure. We seek the ticked box, the final note, the cleared slate. It is why the empty inbox feels so magnetic, so rare, so beautiful. It mirrors an ancient instinct. The satisfaction of completion meant survival. To gather food, to close the hunt, to build the shelter. Completion was the line between safety and vulnerability. Yet, in the modern world, that line has dissolved. The inbox, unlike a hunt, never ends. It is fed by countless unseen hands, across continents and time zones, spilling into your life whether you wish it or not. And so, you are trapped in a cycle your biology cannot escape, longing for finality in a system designed without it. It is not just emails, of course. The empty inbox illusion expands to every corner of existence. Laundry, washed and folded, is worn again. Dishes, scrubbed and stacked, return to the sink. You silence one notification only for another to ring. Even happiness itself, when achieved, proves temporary. You buy the thing you longed for, and soon a new longing takes its place. You solve one worry, and another rushes in. The inbox of life is never empty for long. And this realization leads to an unsettling question. Is the desire for completion itself the trap? We build our days around the fantasy of getting on top of it all. We imagine some future where the list is finished, the inbox is quiet, the tasks are crossed out forever. But perhaps that future does not exist. Perhaps it is not meant to. Perhaps life is less about completion and more about participation. Less about clearing the inbox and more about dancing with its endless arrival. Look deeper. The empty inbox illusion is not just about time and work. It is about mortality. Each time you empty the inbox, you feel a small echo of death, the silence after effort, the nothingness after motion. And each time a new message arrives, it reminds you that life insists on continuation. To live is to be unfinished. To breathe is to interrupt silence. The inbox fills because time moves forward. And one day, when no new message arrives, when no new demand appears, that will be the inbox of death itself. Until then, the cycle continues. Some people fight this endlessly, building systems of productivity, apps that promise to finally control the stream. They create folders, filters, reminders, elaborate architectures of digital discipline. And for a while, it works. They feel a momentary power. But soon enough, the flood adapts. More messages, more obligations, more tasks sneak in from cracks they never sealed. Because the system was never broken, it was infinite by design. To conquer it is to fight the ocean with a bucket. The more you scoop, the more it fills. So what is the answer? Some say surrender. Stop seeking the empty inbox. Stop believing in completion. Accept the endless river and instead learn to dip your hand only where it matters. Others turn the illusion into a mirror for mindfulness. When the inbox fills, they see it not as failure, but as life speaking again, reminding them that existence is always unfinished. In this light, the illusion becomes a lesson. Peace does not come from erasing every message, but from knowing when to let some messages remain unopened. Some tasks remain undone. Some corners remain dusty. Perhaps the greatest truth hidden in the empty inbox illusion is this: life was never meant to be cleared. Its beauty lies in its continuity, in its refusal to end neatly. The inbox that never stays empty is proof that the world is alive, that connection still flows, that your presence still matters enough for demands to arrive at your door. The silence you crave might not be the silence you want, because true silence means absence. True emptiness means nothing left to return. And so the illusion stands, haunting us daily. Each message cleared is a heartbeat, each arrival a new pulse of existence. We can either resist it, clinging to the fantasy of finality, or we can see it for what it is, a reflection of life itself, endlessly arriving, never finished, never silent for long. The inbox fills, the inbox empties, and somewhere between those two tides, you live. Waiting for the right time. We spend our lives waiting for the perfect moment, that illusionary instant when the stars align, when the fear dissolves, when the answer feels obvious, when life itself whispers to us, now. We convince ourselves that patience is wisdom, that hesitation is strategy, that delay is prudence. But more often than not, what we call waiting is simply fear in disguise, fear of failing, fear of being judged, fear of the unknown. So we tell ourselves, I'll begin when I'm ready. I'll take the leap when the time is right. I'll act when the perfect window opens. But here is the haunting truth. That window never opens, or rather, it does, but only once it has already passed. And by the time we notice, all that remains is regret. Think about the moments in your own life when you have postponed action for the right time, the love you didn't confess because you thought the relationship needed more stability, the opportunity you didn't take because you thought you needed more preparation, the dream you didn't pursue because you believed conditions weren't ideal. Later, looking back, you realize that the moment was there. It was alive, trembling, waiting to be seized. But you stood still, and time moved forward without you. This is not just a personal struggle. It is a universal human condition. Across history, entire societies have fallen victim to the myth of the right time. Empires waited to adopt technology until it was too late. Generations postponed revolutions until the fire of change had cooled. Scientists hesitated to publish discoveries because they feared ridicule, only for others to take credit. Progress is not halted by a lack of opportunities. It is halted by hesitation, disguised as prudence. The mind creates the illusion that conditions will be better later, that you will be wiser tomorrow, stronger next week, richer next year. But the reality is that waiting for readiness often guarantees permanent unpreparedness. Life does not send invitations with golden seals. It does not ring a bell to announce that the right time has arrived. Instead, it offers moments that look imperfect, inconvenient, incomplete, and those are the moments that secretly carry the potential to transform everything. Consider the story of countless inventors and artists who leapt before they were ready. Thomas Edison did not wait until he fully understood electricity to pursue the light bulb. He experimented, failed, and through failure discovered. Vincent van Gogh did not wait for recognition before painting. He painted into obscurity, into poverty, into madness. And only later did the world understand the brilliance of his timing. If they had waited for certainty, their contributions might never have existed. Readiness is rarely a starting condition. It is the outcome of beginning. But the opposite is just as true. Imagine the countless manuscripts unwritten, businesses unlaunched, journeys untraveled, lives unlived, simply because the right time never seemed to arrive. Someone waited for the economy to improve before starting. Someone waited until they were confident before speaking. Someone waited until they were healed before loving again. Yet, the cruel paradox is that healing often comes from loving. Confidence comes from speaking, and prosperity comes from starting. The right time is not something you wait for. It is something you create. And here lies the trap. Waiting feels safe. It feels responsible. Society often rewards it. We are told to think carefully, to prepare thoroughly, to be cautious, to not rush. But what is caution if it extends into paralysis? What is preparation if it becomes perpetual rehearsal? There comes a point when more thinking does not create clarity, but confusion. More waiting does not create opportunity, but decay. More hesitation does not save us from risk, but delivers us straight into regret. Picture a person standing at the edge of a river, waiting for the current to slow before they cross. Hours pass, then days, then years. The river never slows. It flows as it always has. Eventually, the person realizes they are too old, too weak, too late to cross. This is how waiting for the right time erodes us. The flow of life does not pause for our readiness. It moves, relentless and indifferent, whether we act or not. So why do we do it? Why do we cling to this illusion of timing? Because the mind fears responsibility. To act is to declare ourselves vulnerable to failure. To wait is to protect ourselves from accountability. If we never begin, then we never risk losing. If we never try, then we never face rejection. But in avoiding loss, we lose anyway. In avoiding pain, we suffer silently. In avoiding risk, we risk the very meaning of our lives. And here is the terrifying part. Often we don't even notice what we have missed until it is gone. We tell ourselves, maybe tomorrow, maybe next month, maybe next year. And then suddenly, tomorrow has become yesterday. Next month has become last year. And the chance has vanished into memory. It is only in hindsight that we recognize the window, and it is only in hindsight that we realize it is permanently closed. Every regret we carry is often born from this cycle. Rarely do we regret acting, even when we fail, but we almost always regret waiting. Ask an older person what weighs heavier, the risks they took or the ones they didn't. The answer, almost without exception, is the chances not taken, the words not spoken, the doors never opened. Regret is the shadow of hesitation, following us long after the moment has passed. But this realization does not need to be paralyzing. It can be liberating. Because once you see that the right time does not exist, you are free to stop waiting for it. You are free to recognize that imperfection is not a barrier, but the birthplace of momentum. That fear is not a sign to delay, but a compass pointing toward growth. That hesitation is not safety, but slow erosion. You are free to act, not later, not someday, not when conditions feel ideal, but now. The truth is simple, but it is also relentless. The right time never comes. The right time is always now. Waiting for the right time is waiting for a ghost. It is hoping for a signal that will never arrive, a green light that will never turn. The only way forward is to step into the unknown before it feels comfortable, to leap while your legs still tremble, to speak while your voice still shakes, to move while your heart is still uncertain, because certainty is not the precondition of courage, it is the reward. So, the question remains, how much longer will you wait? How many more opportunities will pass you by before you realize that the right time is not ahead of you, but inside of you, right here, right now? Every second you wait is a second you never get back. And while you delay, life does not. It moves, it shifts, it changes, and you must decide whether you will move with it or remain frozen, watching from the shore as the river flows away. Lost item location paradox. You know this scene. You're already late, the door is open, the clock is not kind, and your keys have vanished. You retrace every step with forensic precision, kitchen counter, sofa cushions, the jacket you didn't wear, convinced that effort is the currency that buys reality back into order. The more you search, the more the world smudges. Anger sharpens into urgency, urgency into panic, and the house becomes a hostile maze of almosts. Then you sigh, surrender for a moment, decide you'll take a cab and figure it out later. You pour a glass of water, let your shoulders drop, look away, and there they are, quietly gleaming on the windowsill you've checked 3 times already, like a cat that returns only when you stop calling its name. We call this a glitch because it feels cruel, like the object was mocking you. But the truth is gentler and stranger. The mind is not a flashlight that simply brightens what it points at. It is also a filter that darkens what it expects not to see. When you search with clenched attention, your vision narrows into a tunnel where only what fits the story of urgency gets through. You don't just look, you interrogate. And interrogation invites confession, not discovery. So the world withholds its simple answers until you stop trying to force them out. There is a paradox here that runs deeper than lost keys. You only find when you stop searching, but you can't truly stop searching until you feel like you found. The loop tightens. Effort requires release, and release requires trust. And trust is the one thing that effort alone cannot build. It must be chosen. It must be risked. Think of the word on the tip of your tongue. You strain for it. It hovers, electric, and just out of reach. You press harder, the mind grips tighter, and the word moves further into fog. Minutes later, washing your hands or staring out a window, you're not thinking at all. And suddenly the word arrives, fresh as morning, like it never left. The brain has two modes for problem solving, one that focuses like a laser and one that drifts like a tide. The laser is useful. It cuts. But the tide is wise. It brings buried things to shore. When you stop searching, you allow the tide to move. You let the deeper network stitch together the answer you were too tense to receive. Consider a relationship you tried to fix by force. Messages sent with trembling thumbs. Conversations repeated until they lose their meaning. Promises made in the heat of fear. Nothing lands. Then, finally, you stop. Not in despair, but in acceptance. You stop performing rescue missions on someone else's interior weather. Strangely, that is when an honest message appears, not because the universe rewards indifference, but because presence blooms in the space where performance dies. What you stop squeezing too tightly can breathe again. It returns transformed, or it doesn't return, and that is its own kind of finding. Think of grief. You search the house for echoes, the scent in a sweater, the handwriting on an envelope, the laugh saved in a voice note. You hunt for the person in the places they touched. The search is holy and human and exhausting. Then, one day, crossing a street, you notice a certain tilt of sunlight on a car window. You're not searching at all, and yet you are suddenly with them, not as a wound but as a widening. The mind loosened its fist, and memory, no longer chased, stepped beside you like a companion who doesn't need to be held. There's science humming beneath this poetry. When you push your attention too hard, you trigger a vigilant loop that tries to correct errors by scanning for threats. The body tightens, the breath shortens, vision literally narrows. In that state, you will miss the obvious because your eyes are working for your fear, not for your curiosity. Paradoxically, the instruction "don't miss it" makes missing more likely. The mind obeys the verb, not the negation. Tell yourself, "Don't think of the white bear," and you'll conjure polar fur in every corner of your day. Tell yourself, "Find it now," and you'll find only your own tension, magnified. So, how do we step outside the loop without pretending we don't care? You begin by searching skillfully. Set a clear intention. What is the actual target? Name it simply. Keys, wallet, file, answer, forgiveness. Then scan gently, widening your attention to include the periphery. Ask, where would this be if I were not afraid? Move slowly enough that light can pool around what you're seeing. And then, crucially, schedule your surrender. Give yourself 3 honest passes, room by room, idea by idea, and when the third pass ends, stop on purpose. Step out of the task and into something rhythmic. Make tea, fold a shirt, water a plant, walk the hallway without hunting. Rhythms tell the nervous system that the emergency has ended. And when the body believes there is no emergency, vision opens like a window. This is not laziness, it is partnership. The conscious mind is a specialist at articulation and control. The unconscious is a vast pattern-sensing ocean. You must let them speak in turn. Searching is your call, stopping is your listening. Together they form a conversation with reality. You are not meant to shout the entire time. There's a spiritual dimension too, the one that whispers behind the clatter of drawers and the slap of empty pockets. To stop searching is not to abandon the goal. It is to relinquish your demand that reality arrive only in the form you prefer. You make room for surprise, and surprise is where truth likes to hide. The windowsill you ignored becomes a place of revelation. The sentence you couldn't write finishes itself when you're washing the cup. The apology you wanted to extract arrives on its own timeline, delayed, imperfect, and sincerely human. Do you notice how the world behaves when you relax your grip? The colors return. Peripheral sounds, once devoured by your inner monologue, arrange themselves into music. The elevator hum, the clock tick, a neighbor's laugh passing by the door. In that widened field, you are suddenly capable of noticing what was always there. The lost item steps out of camouflage because you stopped dressing everything in the camouflage of urgency. The paradox has a final twist. You think you're looking for a thing, keys, a number, a name, but often you're really looking for permission to proceed without it. You want to believe you can still be okay if you don't find it. And the moment you remember that you can, call a cab, wear the spare, write the message tomorrow, you loosen the knot that choked your perception. The world doesn't punish you for that loosening. It collaborates with it. If you need a practice, try this. The next time something goes missing, set a clock for 3 minutes and search slowly, as if you were moving through water. Narrate kindly in your mind. I'm checking here, now I'm checking there. When the timer ends, stop. Place a small object wherever you are, a coin, a pen cap, as a marker that says, I have left the hunt. Then do one mundane embodied act for 2 minutes. Breathe in 4s, exhale in 6s. Touch the door frame, the wall, the glass of water, naming their textures. When you return to the world of looking, you will not be entering a war. You will be entering a conversation. And conversations reveal more than interrogations ever will. There are greater searches you may need to release. The search for the perfect decision. The search for a past that didn't happen. The search for a future that certifies your worth. These too loosen when touched with rhythm and humility. You cannot bully your way into the center of meaning. You can only become quiet enough to notice that meaning has been circling you like a bird waiting for your hands to stop clapping. It's not that the universe hides things until you perform the right ritual of not caring. It's that attention is obedient to the story you tell it. And when your story is panic, your attention combs the world for evidence of panic. So, change the story. Make it honest. Say, I want this and I can live without it, and I will move kindly through this space until the space wants to speak. Then listen. Hold the door open for the ordinary miracle, the one that makes a windowsill glow. And when the keys return, or the word arrives, or the memory sits beside you unannounced, don't congratulate yourself for finally letting go. Simply notice that in the moment you stopped searching, you started seeing. And that is how the world was always meant to be found. Self-image distortion loop. Imagine standing before a mirror, thinking all you want is to see yourself clearly, stripped of illusions, raw and unfiltered. But the more you stare, the more the reflection begins to bend, warp, and shift. At first you think it is the glass, perhaps flawed, curved, or imperfect. Yet over time, you realize it is not the mirror that changes, it is you. Your mind, hungry for self-certainty, begins to distort the image itself. This is the self-image distortion loop, the paradox where the more desperately you try to define who you are, the less stable and true that definition becomes. Think of it this way. When you hold water too tightly in your hands, it slips through your fingers. Identity is no different. You tell yourself, I want to know who I really am. And so you analyze every gesture, every thought, every weakness, every strength. But that scrutiny transforms the very thing you are trying to see. You cannot observe yourself without altering the perception. Just as in physics, where the act of measuring a particle changes its behavior, in psychology, the act of self-observation bends identity into a shifting, restless shape. You don't find clarity, you find turbulence. Examples are everywhere. A person who feels insecure about how they appear in photos keeps taking more, convinced that one perfect shot will finally capture their true self. But the longer they search, the more alien each image feels. Do I really look like that? Is that me? The more they chase the truth of their face, the more distant it becomes, like a horizon that recedes with every step. Or consider the performer who watches their own recorded performance, trying to see how the audience perceives them. With each replay, new flaws emerge, new doubts surface. What began as self-correction becomes a spiral, and soon the performer no longer knows whether they are acting naturally or simply acting in response to their own self-consciousness. This loop intensifies in the age of social media. We are told to be authentic, Yet the very act of curating our authenticity transforms it into performance. A teenager posts a casual photo, then overanalyzes the likes, the comments, the silences. The reflection they see is not who they are, but who others tell them they might be. With every adjustment, every filter, every caption, the loop tightens. The self bends further from something solid into something refracted, like light through shattered glass. But the loop is not confined to vanity. It seeps deeper into the very core of existence. A philosopher who seeks endlessly to understand the essence of their being begins to dissolve into definitions that contradict each other. Am I my thoughts, my body, my memories, my roles, my future, my past? Each attempt to pin identity down is undone by the very act of analysis. The philosopher finds that the self, once questioned too much, behaves like smoke, visible but impossible to grasp. Try to cage it, and it disperses. This is why the loop feels so haunting. It has no natural end. The more you fight it, the stronger it grows. It is like standing between two mirrors facing each other, watching your reflection multiply into infinite regress. Each version of you seems almost accurate, almost real, yet none of them feels final. The illusion is that there will ever be a last perfect reflection, the one that finally explains you to yourself. But just as you reach for it, it bends again, reshaping into another layer, another mask. Think of relationships. When you fall in love, your partner becomes a mirror, reflecting parts of you back. At first, this reflection feels intoxicating. Someone sees you, understands you, amplifies you. But then, if you cling to that reflection, demanding absolute clarity, you begin to distort it. You see yourself not as you are, but as you fear you might be. Too needy, too distant, too fragile, too cold. And your partner, reacting to this shifting self-image, mirrors it back again. The loop becomes a cycle between two people, each reflection warping the other, until both are trapped in a hall of mirrors where truth can no longer be separated from distortion. Even history itself works in this way. When you look back at who you once were, trying to see yourself clearly, memory reshapes to fit the narrative you now believe. The teenager you recall, the child you once were. These are not untouched truths, but reflections altered by who you are now. The past bends under the pressure of the present gaze. You might think you are revisiting clarity, but you are only polishing a reflection that shifts as you polish it. The self-image distortion loop is not simply a trap. It is also a revelation. It reveals that the self may not be a fixed object waiting to be discovered, but an ever-changing process. Perhaps clarity is not possible because identity itself is not still. You are not a photograph waiting to be developed. You are a river, and every time you look into the water, it flows differently. You do not distort the reflection by looking. You witness the distortion that is already there. The loop shows us the impossibility of permanence in something designed to move. And yet, this realization can feel both terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because it robs us of the fantasy that one day, after enough searching, we will finally meet our true self, like a stranger arriving at the door. Liberating because it reminds us that the pressure to be one fixed self is an illusion. You can never fully see yourself because you are not a thing to be seen. You are the act of seeing itself. You are the observer, and the reflection is only ever partial. So what do? Do we surrender and stop searching altogether? Not exactly. The key lies in loosening the grip. Instead of trying to hold the reflection still, let it dance. Instead of demanding perfect clarity, accept the blur. Think of art. The most powerful portraits are not always those with perfect accuracy, but those that leave room for interpretation, for shifting light, for mystery. The same is true of the self. To embrace the loop is to accept that your image will never stop moving, and that this motion is not failure, it is life itself. The self-image distortion loop is real because it is woven into perception. It is the paradox that to know yourself too deeply is to change the self you know. It is the endless chase of reflection across time, memory, and relationships. And perhaps, in the end, the only way out of the loop is not to find the perfect reflection, but to realize that you were never meant to. You are not a single image to be discovered. You are the shifting mirror itself, endlessly refracting, endlessly alive. Calendar space trap. Imagine this. You spend hours reorganizing your life, clearing the to-do list, canceling minor commitments, and finally carving out that precious stretch of free time you've been craving. You look at your calendar with pride, empty boxes, wide-open days, a breathing space you fought to create. But then, like water rushing to fill a vacuum, new obligations appear. A colleague suddenly schedules an urgent meeting. A family member needs a favor. A bill demands attention. A forgotten responsibility emerges like a ghost you thought you had already buried. The calendar you had cleared begins to refill, almost as if it cannot stand the silence, and you're left wondering, was the emptiness ever real, or is it that life conspires to never let you be still? This is the trap of the calendar space illusion, the belief that once you clear obligations, the silence will remain. But in reality, time hates a vacuum. Like physical space, like air rushing into a void, life itself invents new tasks to occupy what you've emptied. You tell yourself, if I just finish everything now, I'll finally be free. Yet freedom remains just out of reach, postponed again and again, until the act of chasing it becomes another task on the schedule. This is not just an inconvenience. It's a deep psychological pattern, a loop that we fall into without realizing. Think of a time when you worked relentlessly to free up a weekend, planning for pure rest. You canceled outings, you rearranged chores, you tied up loose ends at work. Friday night arrives, and for a moment you believe you've succeeded. But then your phone buzzes. A friend wants to talk about a crisis. A neighbor asks for help. Suddenly the quiet space is filled again, not by choice, but by inevitability, and you begin to suspect that emptiness itself is intolerable, that the world bends to prevent it, that stillness is the most fragile state of all. Psychologists call this a version of Parkinson's law, the principle that work expands to fill the time available. But here, it's not just work. It's every obligation, every social tether, every hidden demand you didn't account for. The moment you think you have time, the moment you expect the void, life creates new currents to drag you back in. And strangely, sometimes you yourself are the culprit. Out of habit, you volunteer for things you didn't need to. Out of guilt, you accept invitations you don't want. Out of anxiety, you create fresh lists to fill the silence. You become addicted to motion, mistaking busyness for purpose, mistaking occupation for meaning. Isn't it haunting that freedom feels like something you can schedule, like a slot in a planner, and yet the very act of trying to schedule it ensures that it disappears? Imagine a monk who empties his calendar entirely, refusing every new demand, choosing nothing but silence. Even then, the obligations would return, not as meetings, but as the needs of the body. Hunger would interrupt. Fatigue would insist on rest. Memories would resurface as unresolved debts of the mind. Even in isolation, the calendar space trap persists because the obligations are not just external, they're internal, woven into the structure of existence itself. It raises a terrifying question. Are we designed to never be free? Is the structure of human life itself built on obligation, on task, on filling the void with one thing or another? If so, then clearing a calendar is never truly about creating space. It's about rearranging the inevitabilities of existence into a pattern you can momentarily endure. You never defeat the trap. You only move the bars to a slightly different angle, hoping it feels less like a prison. And yet, this recognition doesn't have to be despair. There's a strange beauty in understanding the inevitability of refilling. If you know that empty space will not remain empty, you can choose what fills it. Instead of random obligations, instead of endless leaks of time, you can deliberately place what matters most. The trap then becomes less a curse and more a reminder that time is alive, restless, impossible to pin down. You cannot cage silence, but you can shape the noise. So the next time you find yourself clearing the schedule, hoping for a pocket of nothingness, remember, the nothingness will not last. But perhaps it was never meant to. Perhaps the deeper question is not, how do I keep my calendar empty? But what do I allow to flood in when the emptiness disappears? The answer to that question might determine not just how you spend your days, but who you become in the spaces between them. This is the calendar space trap, an endless loop where freedom dissolves into obligation the moment you try to hold it. And perhaps the only way to step out of the trap is to stop believing that emptiness is freedom at all. Missing key mystery. There is a strange kind of betrayal that happens not in the world outside, but in the quiet corridors of your own memory. You are searching for your keys. You check the table, the counter, the pocket of your jacket. You bend down, peer beneath the couch, retrace your steps, open drawers you rarely touch. Again and again, your eyes fall upon the same spaces, and with each glance, certainty grows. The keys are not here. You feel frustration build, irritation whispering that you are wasting time. And yet, after circling through every possibility, you return once more to the very spot you swore you had already searched. And there they are, sitting in plain sight, mocking you, waiting all along. This is the missing key mystery, a small but disorienting crack in the trust we place in our perception. Because in that moment, you feel reality shift. How could your eyes have passed over them so many times, only to suddenly see them as if they materialized from nothing? Did the keys vanish and return? Or did your mind betray you, filtering reality until it fit some invisible narrative? The world feels less solid, less reliable. If your senses can deceive you in something as small as keys, what else do they hide? Psychologists call this phenomenon inattentional blindness. The brain, flooded with data, chooses what to notice and what to discard. It edits reality before you ever see it. So, when you search the table the first time, perhaps your mind, overloaded with frustration, urgency, and assumption, simply refused to register the keys. They were there, but you were not prepared to see them. And so, your brain quietly erased them, protecting its fragile model of the world. Only later, when expectation shifted, did the veil lift and the keys return. It is not the world that changed, but the lens through which you viewed it. Yet that explanation feels too clean, too clinical, for the eeriness of the moment. Because when you finally find the keys, it does not feel like you missed them. It feels like they appeared, as though reality itself glitched, rewound, re-rendered, and here lies the deeper unease. What if it did? What if time folds in subtle ways, adjusting itself without our permission? What if the missing keys are tiny fractures, reminders that the continuity we believe in is only a projection? Think of how often this pattern repeats. You misplace your phone, only to discover it in the very spot you checked. You swear you locked the door, only to return and find it unlocked. You reread a page of text and swear a sentence has shifted. These moments pass quickly, written off as carelessness, yet they carry a quiet weight. They suggest that your experience of reality is not absolute, but negotiated. The line between perception and existence is blurrier than you wish to admit. The missing key mystery teaches us something unsettling about memory as well. Each time you check a place, you are not just scanning objects. You are creating a memory of absence. You convince yourself the keys were not there. Later, when the keys appear, you are forced into a contradiction. The memory says one thing, the eyes another. And because you cannot hold both, your mind performs its own sleight of hand. It tells you, you must have missed them. You must be mistaken. But are you? Or is memory rewriting itself to preserve a fragile illusion of consistency? This is not just about lost keys. It is about how we live. Every day we walk through a reality filtered by expectation, attention, and assumption. We see what we believe should be there, not what is. We overlook what does not fit. We lose what does not align with our story. And when those things resurface, we are left disoriented, questioning ourselves instead of questioning the limits of perception. The world holds more than we allow ourselves to see. There is another layer too, the symbolic. The missing keys are not just objects of metal and weight. They are metaphors. Keys unlock doors, grant access, open pathways. To lose them is to be locked out of progress, trapped in a liminal state of waiting. To find them again where you swore they were not is to be reminded of how fragile your control truly is. You are not the master of your environment. You are a wanderer in a shifting maze, at the mercy of your own mind and the strange currents of chance. Perhaps the missing key mystery is life's way of humbling us. It whispers that certainty is dangerous, that perception is fallible, that memory is fragile. It forces us to question the solidity of the world we inhabit. Because if your eyes can lie about something as simple as keys, what might they conceal in moments that matter more? What truths might remain invisible simply because you do not know how to look? And maybe that is the lesson. To live with curiosity, not certainty. To understand that reality is larger than your attention can grasp. To know that just because you do not see something does not mean it is absent. The keys remind us, every time they vanish and return, that the world is both familiar and unknowable, that sometimes the mystery lies not in the object, but in the one who seeks. So the next time you lose your keys and find them again in the same place, pause. Feel the unease. Recognize that you are standing in a crack between perception and truth. And ask yourself, what else waits unseen in the places you've already checked? The politeness dilemma. We are taught from childhood that politeness is virtue, that kindness lives in restraint, that silence is safer than truth, that sparing someone's feelings is more noble than speaking honestly. And yet, beneath the surface of every polite silence lies a paradox. In trying to protect someone from discomfort, you may create a deeper wound, the wound of distance, of dishonesty, of being unseen. This is the politeness dilemma, when your attempt to avoid offense becomes the very act that offends. Think of the countless moments you've held back. A friend asks for your opinion, but you offer a softened version, afraid to hurt them. A colleague presents an idea, and you smile politely, though inside you know it is flawed. A partner asks what is wrong, and you say, nothing, because you don't want to start a conflict. You think you are choosing peace, but what you are truly choosing is absence, because the words you withhold are still felt in the silence. And silence, strangely, often echoes louder than speech. Humans are wired to detect more than language. We sense tone, we feel hesitation, we notice avoidance. When you hide the truth to protect someone, they often feel the gap, the dissonance, the withholding. They may not know the details, but they know something is missing. And that absence can be more painful than the truth itself. Your silence tells them, I don't trust you with my honesty. I don't believe you can bear my truth. And in that, the bond weakens. The very thing you were trying to protect, connection, is eroded by the act of concealment. History and psychology both reveal the weight of this dilemma. Consider leaders who surrounded themselves with yes men, too polite to question them. Empires collapsed, not because enemies were too strong, but because truth was silenced in the name of courtesy. Think of the Challenger disaster in 1986, when engineers suspected danger but softened their warnings out of deference and corporate pressure. Politeness disguised as respect became complicity in tragedy. When silence replaces honesty, it is not kindness. It is abandonment. And yet, honesty is terrifying. We avoid it because truth carries the risk of rupture. To tell someone their work is flawed may discourage them. To admit dissatisfaction in a relationship may cause conflict. To reveal your real opinion may shift how others see you. We fear that speaking might destroy the bridge between us. But here is the paradox. Silence can destroy it even faster. When words are unspoken, the other begins to fill the void with their own fears, their own insecurities. They imagine worse than what you could have said. They feel excluded from your inner world, and that exclusion feels like betrayal. Think of a time when someone stayed silent with you. When you asked a question and they gave only a vague answer. When you sensed something was wrong, but they denied it. Did their politeness comfort you? Or did it unsettle you? Did it make you feel closer? Or did it make you feel more distant? The truth is, we crave authenticity more than we crave comfort. We can forgive harsh words, but we rarely forgive dishonesty. Because dishonesty whispers that we were not worthy of the truth. In relationships, this dilemma plays out endlessly. A partner holds back frustrations to keep the peace, but the silence grows into resentment. A friend avoids difficult feedback, but the lack of honesty prevents growth. A family member conceals pain, but in doing so, they shut others out of their real experience. What begins as politeness becomes poison. What begins as protection becomes betrayal. Silence does not preserve harmony. It slowly corrodes it. But what is the alternative? Brutal honesty, unfiltered, without care? No. Truth without compassion is cruelty. Compassion without truth is emptiness. The challenge is not to choose between honesty and kindness. It is to weave them together, to speak truth in a way that honors both the reality and the person, to say, this may be hard to hear, but I value you enough to share it. To let honesty become a gift, not a weapon, because the people who love us most are not the ones who protect us from reality. They are the ones who trust us with it. The politeness dilemma asks us to reflect. What do we fear more, conflict or disconnection? Offense in the moment or distance that lingers? Too often, we choose the immediate safety of silence, not realizing that it grows into the deeper pain of being unknown. A relationship without honesty is like a body without oxygen. It may look alive for a while, but it is already suffocating. In truth, silence is not neutral. It communicates whether you intend it or not. It says, I do not trust you. I do not think you can handle me. I will smile, nod, and withhold myself. But if love and friendship mean anything, they must mean this: that I am safe to be real with you, and you are safe to be real with me. Anything less is a performance, and performances, no matter how polished, cannot nourish the soul. So the next time you feel the pull of the politeness dilemma, when you are tempted to smile instead of speak, to nod instead of reveal, ask yourself, is my silence truly protecting them, or is it protecting me? Am I shielding them from pain, or am I shielding myself from discomfort? And which wound will cut deeper, the sting of truth today, or the quiet erosion of trust tomorrow? The answer is rarely simple, but it is always worth remembering that offense fades, but distance endures. Truth can hurt, but silence hollows. We do not need less honesty in this world. We need more honest kindness. Words that wound but also heal. Words that challenge but also connect. Because in the end, it is not our politeness that keeps us close, but our courage to be real. Decluttering, overflow, effect. Imagine this: one weekend, determined to reclaim your peace of mind, you decide to declutter. You pull open drawers swollen with papers, shelves sagging with things you forgot you owned, clothes stuffed so tightly they wrinkle into silence. The process feels liberating. Each bag of donations, each trip to the trash, is like peeling a layer of suffocation from your chest. You stand back, proud, staring at the clean lines of your desk, the empty floor, the closet breathing again. You whisper to yourself, finally, simplicity. But the story doesn't end there. A week passes, and suddenly you notice the emptiness like a missing tooth. You feel a subtle urge, an itch disguised as inspiration. The empty shelves don't soothe you. They invite you to fill them. I should get a better lamp here, you think. A new jacket would really make the closet feel complete now that I've cleared the old ones. The cycle begins again, and what you threw away to gain freedom becomes the very reason you start buying more. This is the decluttering overflow effect, the paradox where simplification creates space, and space whispers seductively to be filled again. It is not just about possessions, it is about psychology. The human mind struggles with emptiness. We are pattern-making creatures, storytellers, and when space opens up, it feels like a blank page begging for words. We think space is peace, but unconsciously, space is possibility, and possibility tempts us. When your desk is clear, you suddenly imagine new gadgets that could optimize it. When your wardrobe is half empty, advertisements for clothes land not as noise, but as answers to an unspoken need. Even digital space plays the same trick. Delete old files, clear your inbox, and somehow it fills faster than before, as if the act of clearing signals readiness for more. Think of how cities work. When roads are widened to ease congestion, traffic eventually swells to fill the new lanes, an effect urban planners call induced demand. Space itself does not remain neutral. It generates its own appetite. Your home, your closet, your calendar, even your mind, all obey the same law. When you clear them, you trigger the illusion of freedom, but freedom is mistaken for capacity, and capacity begs to be consumed. Examples haunt everyday life. You finish a minimalist purge of your living room, but then a boutique ad convinces you that a sleek new couch will match the clean look. You donate half your shoes, then reward yourself with the perfect pair you always wanted. The emptiness becomes a justification for acquiring. You aren't hoarding anymore, you're curating. But curation, ironically, becomes a more expensive, more addictive form of clutter. This effect reaches into time as well. You clear your schedule, thinking you'll enjoy the luxury of rest. But almost immediately, invitations, projects, and tasks seep in. You say yes because you feel the pressure of the empty calendar. Restful space is quickly mistaken for wasted time, and the void fills faster than you can protect it. Why does this happen? Because emptiness confronts us with ourselves. An empty room reflects back a question. Who are you without the noise? An empty calendar asks, what matters when nothing is forcing your hand? Most of us are uncomfortable with that silence, so we fill it, not with what is essential, but with whatever distractions promise to disguise the void. There is another danger. Decluttering often gives us the illusion of progress, the sense that by throwing away we are moving forward. But if the mindset does not change, the cycle only resets. We treat decluttering like a ritual of rebirth. Yet, we keep planting the same seeds of overconsumption. The closet is reborn, yes, but with the same soil that grows more clothes. So, what is the way out? It is not simply to resist buying. It is to see the hunger for what it is, a discomfort with emptiness. Instead of rushing to fill the space, sit in it. Let the bare desk be bare. Let the open calendar be open. Train your nervous system to stop equating emptiness with incompleteness. Emptiness is not a lack. It is an invitation. But not every invitation must be accepted. Minimalism is not about subtracting things once. It is about learning to live with the silence that subtraction creates. And silence, if you let it, will show you that peace was never about clearing space to make room for more. It was about making room for yourself. The never-ending to-do. You know the feeling. That rare moment when you push through the clutter of demands, grind through every task, and finally reach the end of your list. The inbox is cleared, the desk is tidy, the obligations are fulfilled. For a brief, fleeting second, you stand at the top of the mountain of productivity, thinking, this is it. This is what completion feels like. But then, almost instantly, the mountain stretches taller. Finishing your tasks has only given birth to new ones. You clear an email, and 2 more arrive. You fix one problem, and the solution itself reveals 3 more that must be dealt with. The list you conquered folds into itself and expands again, like a hydra that grows 2 heads for every one you cut. This is the paradox of the never-ending to-do. It is not simply about workload. It is about the psychology of pursuit. Completion is supposed to feel like closure, but closure is an illusion. Every step forward exposes another layer of what remains undone. You write a report, and suddenly it needs editing. You clean the house, and dust begins to fall again. You save money, and new expenses creep into existence. The task is not an endpoint. It is a gateway. Completion doesn't end the cycle. It perpetuates it. Consider the modern office. A manager assigns a project. Create a new system to streamline communication. The team works tirelessly, burning late nights, checking every box. The system launches successfully. But now, it requires training, updates, troubleshooting, metrics, and feedback sessions. The very task designed to reduce work has created 1,000 new micro-tasks. The illusion of completion vanishes, replaced with an endless chain of next steps. Even in personal life, the loop consumes us. A student believes that once exams are over, they can finally relax. But finishing exams means preparing for internships, for interviews, for the next semester. A parent thinks that once the child is old enough, the hardest part is over. But each milestone, walking, school, adolescence, brings new responsibilities, new forms of worry. Life is structured in such a way that the finish line is always shifting further away. Psychologists describe this as the completion treadmill. Human beings crave a sense of accomplishment, yet the moment we achieve it, our brains reorient toward what is left undone. We are wired to move the goalpost. It is why crossing off a task feels good for only a moment before the emptiness of the next one appears. The brain does not allow rest, because to rest would feel like stagnation. The paradox is that success ensures more work, not less. But this isn't only a curse, it is also a clue. It suggests that life is not designed for completion. There is no final inbox zero, no ultimate to-do list that, once finished, frees you forever. Existence is iterative. Like a story that refuses its ending, the narrative of tasks loops endlessly, not because you are failing, but because that is its nature. To finish one thing is to uncover the structure of another. And yet, we struggle against this truth. We treat the list as though it were conquerable. We fantasize about the day when the house is permanently clean, when the career is finally settled, when the schedule clears completely. But what if that fantasy itself is the trap? What if chasing completion blinds us to the reality that the to-do list was never meant to end? Think of nature. A river never says, "I am done flowing." A tree never says, "I am done growing." The cycle is not a flaw, but a function. Your to-do list is not broken because it keeps expanding. It is alive. Each checked box is not closure, but creation. Each finished task is not the end of work, but the birth of possibility. The question then is not how to end the list, but how to live within it. Can you embrace the rhythm without demanding finality? Can you find satisfaction not in completion, but in the motion itself? Perhaps the peace we are chasing is not in the silence after tasks are done, but in the music of tasks themselves, each one a note, each one flowing into the next. The never-ending to-do is real because it mirrors life itself, unfinished, recursive, always moving. You do not escape it by finishing. You escape it by accepting that you were never meant to. The list is not your enemy. The list is your life. The perfect reply. Delay. You sit in a conversation, words flowing back and forth, yet beneath the rhythm of dialogue, there's a quiet struggle. Your mind races for the right phrase, the clever remark, the comforting response that would fit perfectly in the moment. But when the silence ends, when the conversation fades, that is when it arrives. The perfect reply. The flawless sentence that would have changed everything, reshaped the tone, revealed your wit, or expressed your care. And yet it comes too late, like a guest who shows up at the door only after the party has already ended. This phenomenon is so common, it has a name in French, l'esprit de l'escalier, staircase wit. It describes that haunting moment when the words finally arrive, but only after you've walked away, when you're already descending the staircase, replaying the conversation in your mind. And what's fascinating is not just that this happens, but that it happens almost universally, as if the mind's timing is deliberately misaligned with the world's rhythm. Why does the perfect reply always come late? Part of it is the weight of real-time pressure. In conversation, your brain is juggling too many things at once. Tone, body language, social cues, hidden meanings, your own emotions, the pacing of speech. It's like trying to juggle knives while also solving a puzzle. And in that overload, the deeper, sharper insights remain hidden, waiting beneath the noise. It is only when the conversation ends, when the demand for instant response is lifted, that your mind exhales. The right words rise slowly, like bubbles through water, but by then, the listener is gone. Think of the arguments that replay endlessly in your head. You walk away, hours later, still rewriting the script. You imagine the devastating comeback, the gentle reassurance, the line that would have made them laugh. These after responses aren't just fantasy. They're a reflection of the brain working in hindsight mode, a slower system of thought that excels at reflection but lags behind in speed. And in some way, they reveal a painful truth. You are often wiser after the fact than in the moment. But here's the deeper layer. The perfect reply delay exposes our longing for control. We want conversations to be neat, symmetrical, tied up like stories. We want our words to land at the right moment, to prove we are thoughtful, witty, or kind. Yet real life is messier. Words stumble, timing fails, silence hangs too long. And perhaps the perfection we crave is not meant to belong to the living moment, but to memory. Because memory itself is an editor, constantly reshaping the past into cleaner versions, polishing it into the story we wish had happened. Consider how many friendships, romances, and conflicts have been shaped not by what was said, but by what was never said in time. A delayed confession, an apology that arrived too late, a joke that might have healed the silence. These absences ripple through lives, not because the perfect words never existed, but because they existed only in exile, just beyond the threshold of the moment. Isn't it haunting to think that our best selves, the eloquent, compassionate, brilliant versions of us, live just a few seconds too late? That the truest version of what we meant to say always arrives when the chance to say it has already vanished. This is the paradox of human communication. Presence demands immediacy, but truth often requires delay. And so, we live trapped between the two, replaying the staircase conversations in our minds, haunted by the words that almost existed. And yet, there is a strange beauty in this imperfection. Perhaps conversations are not meant to be flawless performances, but fragile, unfinished sketches. Perhaps the delayed replies are not failures, but reminders of how much more there is inside us. Thoughts that could not fit into the fleeting breath of spoken time. The perfect reply may never reach the other person, but it reaches you. It reveals your depth, your care, your longing to connect. In that sense, it's not wasted. It's a mirror of who you are becoming, even if no one else hears it. The perfect reply delay is not just about speech. It is about the human condition itself. We are always too late to the moment, always realizing too much after the fact, always chasing time with words we wish we'd spoken sooner. But maybe the point is not to defeat the delay, but to accept it, to know that every unsaid word carries its own quiet existence in memory, shaping us long after the conversation has ended. This is the tragedy and the poetry of the perfect reply delay. That what you most needed to say was always inside you, but the moment to say it belonged to time, and time had already moved on. Red light, impatience. You are sitting at an intersection, staring at the red glow. It is just a light, a signal of patience, a pause demanded by the world around you. And yet, as the seconds crawl by, it begins to feel like something more. You glance at the clock, then back at the traffic signal, and a strange illusion takes hold. The more you watch, the longer it takes to change. Each second stretches, warps, expands beyond its natural shape until the red feels endless, eternal. And the moment you look away, to your phone, to the window, to the drifting thoughts in your head, the green arrives as if it had been waiting for your attention to wander. This is the paradox of red light impatience, an everyday distortion of time that reveals just how fragile our perception of the world really is. Because the light does not change more slowly simply because you stare at it. The mechanism is precise, indifferent, governed by circuits and timers. What changes is you, the act of staring. The act of waiting magnifies time, making seconds feel swollen, like drops of water falling too slowly from a leaking faucet. Your impatience feeds the illusion, and in feeding it, you are trapped by it. Why does this happen? At the core lies the strange relationship between attention and time. When you fixate, when you narrow your awareness onto a single object, the unmoving red glow, your brain loses the ability to compress the experience. Each moment is felt in its raw form, stripped of distraction, and the result is an unbearable density. You are forced to feel every second fully, without the relief of forgetting. And the more impatient you are, the more your brain searches for movement, for change, for escape. And not finding it stretches the sensation further. Time slows when you want it to speed up. Time speeds when you wish it to linger. It is a cruel symmetry, and it governs much more than traffic lights. Think of childhood classrooms where you watched the clock tick toward the end of the day. Minutes felt like hours, hours like eternities. And yet, on weekends or in play, whole days dissolved into what felt like an instant. The mechanism of the clock did not change. Only your perception did. To watch too closely is to invite distortion. To yearn too much is to slow the river. The red light is not slow. You are. Impatience is a weight that bends time around itself. This phenomenon is not just annoyance. It is a mirror of how we experience life itself. We wait for milestones, the job offer, the wedding day, the long-anticipated trip. We fix our attention on these points in the future, and as we wait, time thickens. Days leading up to an event stretch endlessly, but once the event passes, memory collapses the weight into a thin thread. The waiting was long, the recollection short. The red light is a microcosm of this, a symbol of the dissonance between how we live and how we remember. There is also something deeply psychological in the frustration of the red light. It denies us control. In most moments of life, you can act, move, push forward, but here, you are held still by an indifferent system. You cannot force the green to arrive. You cannot shorten the cycle. You are powerless, and so impatience blooms. Watching the light becomes a battle between your desire for motion and the system's indifference to your desire. The longer you stare, the more powerless you feel, and the longer time stretches. And so, impatience becomes its own punishment. Some people try to trick the illusion. They look away. They fiddle with the radio. They check their messages, clean the dashboard, adjust the mirror. And almost without fail, when they finally distract themselves, the light changes. It feels like a joke the universe plays on you. The green arrives only when you stop looking. But this is not the universe mocking you. It is your perception reminding you that attention is not neutral. When you look away, your brain compresses time. You skip moments without noticing them. And so, the green feels sudden, miraculous, perfectly timed. In truth, it was never delayed. You simply stopped stretching it with your impatience. But let us go deeper. The red light. Impatience is more than a quirk of psychology. It is a metaphor for the way we live. How often do we stand at the red lights of existence, waiting for change, staring at obstacles, watching the unmoving signal of life. We count the seconds of hardship, the days of longing, the years of struggle, and in staring so closely, we make the suffering feel longer, heavier, more unbearable. Yet, when we finally release attention, when we look elsewhere, time moves more easily. The green always comes, but not when we demand it. It comes when it is ready, and often, when we stop insisting on its arrival. The illusion also holds a quiet lesson. Patience is not about waiting less, but about changing how you wait. To sit at the red light with clenched hands and narrowed eyes is to stretch time into agony, to sit with calm, to let your attention wander, to breathe into the moment, is to soften time's weight. The seconds pass whether you resist them or not. The light changes whether you watch it or not. The only thing you control is how you inhabit those seconds. Impatience is optional. The red light is not. And perhaps the deeper mystery is this. Why do we feel life should move faster when it slows and slower when it speeds? Why do we always long for the opposite of what is? In this way, the red light is a reminder of our eternal discontent. It shows us that suffering often comes not from the world itself, but from the distance between what is and what we want. We want the green, but are given the red. We want the moment gone, but it insists on remaining. We want time to hurry, but it will not be rushed. And so, the suffering is born not from the light, but from the longing. The next time you are trapped at a red light, watch yourself watching it. Notice how the seconds change their weight when you lean too hard upon them. Feel how impatience bends time out of shape, and then, if you can, release it. Let your mind drift to the music on the radio, to the clouds drifting above, to the rhythm of your own breath. The green will come when it comes. It always does. And when it arrives, it may feel less like a miracle and more like the simple truth. Time moves as it should, and your impatience was only a shadow on its flow. Because the more you watch the light, the longer it seems to take. But the truth is simpler, gentler, more forgiving. The light was always changing, exactly when it was meant to. It was not the red that lingered, it was you. Memory photo gap. You lift the camera, raise your phone, and press capture. The shutter clicks, freezing the moment forever. At least that's what you believe. You think you are preserving life, safeguarding memory, holding on to time. But what if, in the very act of recording, you step out of the experience itself? What if your attempt to hold the moment becomes the reason you lose it? This is the strange paradox of the memory photo gap, when the very tools we use to preserve memories rob us of living them. We all do it. At a concert, the lights explode across the stage, the sound vibrates through your chest, and instead of letting the music consume you, you raise your phone to record. On a vacation, standing before a mountain or ocean, your first impulse is not to breathe it in, but to frame it. At a birthday, instead of being fully inside the laughter, you adjust the angle, take another shot, then check how it looks. You think you are treasuring the moment, but your mind is not present. It is divided, performing, curating. You are not living the moment, you are managing it for later. Psychologists call this the photo-taking impairment effect. Studies have shown that people who photograph an experience actually remember it less vividly than those who do not. When you rely on the camera to hold the memory, your brain stops encoding it deeply. It delegates the responsibility. The result is that you walk away with a gallery of images, but an emptiness inside the memory itself. You have the proof, but not the presence. The record, but not the resonance. Consider the irony. You take photos to remember, but what you remember is taking photos. You recall holding the device, adjusting the zoom, checking the screen. The event itself becomes blurred. Years later, when you look back, you don't feel the ocean spray or the heartbeat of the concert. You feel the act of documenting. The photograph becomes the memory, replacing the experience it was meant to preserve. This is the gap, the hollow space between life lived and life recorded. Technology has deepened this gap. Our ancestors painted on cave walls, carved stones, wrote journals, not to replace experience, but to extend it. But today, with cameras in our pockets, we document almost reflexively. Every meal, every gathering, every sunrise becomes content. Instead of existing in the moment, we produce the moment, polish it, broadcast it. And the more we curate, the less we inhabit. The moment becomes something we are already losing even as we hold it. Think about weddings, where entire ceremonies are filtered through lenses. Guests watch the bride not with their eyes, but through their phones, as if presence requires proof. Or parents at school plays, so intent on filming their children that they never actually see them with unmediated eyes. Years later, those same recordings are played back, but the parent is not in the memory. They were behind the device, absent in spirit though physically present. The child remembers not the gaze of love, but the cold glass of a screen. But perhaps the most haunting part of the memory photo gap is what it reveals about our relationship with time. We do not trust ourselves to live a moment fully, so we outsource it to devices. We think memory is fragile, unfaithful, fleeting. But maybe it is not memory that fails us. Maybe it is attention. If we dared to be fully here, to risk experiencing without capturing, our memories might embed themselves deeper than any photograph. Yet, we distrust ourselves, so we reach for proof. We would rather have the evidence of having lived than the feeling of truly living. And yet, there is another side to this paradox. Photographs can be beautiful, powerful, necessary. They can preserve stories across generations, capture details that fade with age, immortalize people long after they are gone. But even here, their value does not come from replacing the moment, but from extending it. The danger is not in taking photos. The danger is in letting the photo replace the moment in your heart. To mistake documentation for living. To trade presence for permanence. Imagine standing at a child's first steps. You could film it and replay it forever. But in doing so, you may miss the rawness of being there, the stumble, the trembling smile, the eyes meeting yours in discovery. Or you could watch with nothing but your eyes. Let the moment burn itself into you, imperfect, but alive. That memory will not live in pixels, but in you. And while it may fade with time, it will always belong to your soul, not to a file. So the question is not whether we should take photos or not. The question is, what balance do we want between capturing and living? Do we want our lives to be archives, perfectly documented but scarcely felt? Or do we want them to be experiences, deeply lived, even if imperfectly remembered? The gap only widens when we forget that the photograph is meant to serve the moment, not the other way around. There is a silent tragedy in realizing that the most photographed generations in history may also be the least present. Billions of images, yet fewer lived memories. Pictures of food eaten without savoring, trips taken without noticing, gatherings attended without truly connecting. We are drowning in captured moments, but starving for lived ones. And the saddest part is that we may not realize it until too late, when the gallery is full, but the heart is empty. What then is the way forward? Perhaps it is to remind ourselves that presence is irreplaceable, that the eyes are more powerful than any lens, the mind more faithful than any file, the heart more enduring than any archive. That sometimes the most sacred way to honor a moment is not to record it, but to surrender to it. To let it wash through you unfiltered, without evidence, without proof, knowing that even if the memory fades, you were there, truly there, fully alive in that unrepeatable instant. Because in the end, photographs are not immortality. They are artifacts. What gives them life is not their pixels, but the memory behind them. And if the memory is hollow, the photograph is only paper, only pixels. But if the memory is alive, the photograph becomes a doorway back to something real. The choice is ours. Do we live to capture or capture to live? So the next time you raise your phone to seize a moment, pause. Ask yourself, am I trying to hold on to life, or am I stepping out of it? Will I remember this as it was, or will I only remember holding this device? And most of all, what if the truest way to remember is not to photograph at all, but to simply be? Conversation loop stall. It begins with a promise, soft and casual, almost harmless. We should talk more. You say it to a friend you miss, a sibling you've drifted from, a parent who worries about you, even a partner across the room. The words hang there like a bridge you've drawn on paper, but never built in stone. For a moment, both of you smile, warmed by the illusion of reconnection. You think the gap has been acknowledged, that recognition itself is progress. But then the days pass, and the call is never made, the message is never sent. The silence resumes. The phrase becomes its own stall, a ritual that replaces the very thing it promises. This is the trap of the conversation loop stall. The more often you say, we should talk more, the less likely you are to actually do it, because saying it scratches the itch just enough to convince you that action has already been taken. Your brain rewards you with a hit of completion. You spoke the intent, and in that fleeting moment, it feels like a step forward. But in reality, the words become a substitute for the act. You trade a handshake for a relationship, a sketch for the cathedral. It's like standing at the door and never knocking. You imagine the warmth inside. You imagine being welcomed, and that imagination becomes enough to prevent the effort. This is why the same phrase echoes over years, between old classmates at reunions, co-workers at farewell parties, relatives at weddings and funerals. We should talk more. And yet, the only conversation that continues is that same sentence, repeated, polished by neglect into a habit of absence. Why does this happen? Because intention is easier than intimacy. True conversation requires energy, presence, vulnerability. It means carving time out of the chaos, risking the discomfort of silence, hearing stories you might not know how to answer. But saying, "we should talk more," is safe. It positions you as caring without requiring you to demonstrate care. It is a socially acceptable placeholder, a way to avoid admitting, "I want to connect, but I don't know how." Or worse, "I want to connect, but not enough to make the space for it." There's a psychology to this loop. Behavioral researchers call it intention-behavior gap, the phenomenon where people sincerely declare what they want to do, but fail to follow through. The declaration itself gives a false sense of achievement. Think of New Year's resolutions. The act of saying, "I'll get fit," floods you with a feeling of progress, even if you never set foot in a gym. "We should talk more" functions the same way. A resolution disguised as connection, abandoned as soon as it's spoken. But it's not just about laziness. Sometimes it's about fear. If you and I truly talked more, what might surface? The resentment we've avoided, the distance we don't know how to bridge, the ways we've changed that no longer fit neatly together. So, instead of diving into the deep water of conversation, we skim the surface with that safe little phrase. It keeps the bond suspended, neither broken nor renewed. It is the linguistic equivalent of pressing pause on a movie you're afraid to finish. And yet, silence has a weight. Each time "we should talk more" is said and left empty, the phrase itself weakens. Eventually, it becomes a code both parties understand. We won't talk more. We'll repeat the wish at the next encounter, then let it dissolve again. The words become a kind of fossil, proof that there once was a desire, but no longer a living effort. You can see this in families fractured by time zones, friendships suffocated by adulthood, or relationships stuck in polite autopilot. The loop is always the same. You meet, you exchange pleasantries, you acknowledge the distance, you say, "we should talk more," and then you don't. Years compress into these tiny repeated exchanges until one day the chance to talk is gone entirely, and all that remains are those 4 words echoing with the hollowness of unkept promises. To break the stall, the solution is deceptively simple. Stop saying it. Replace the vague future with a concrete present. Instead of "we should talk more," say, "Are you free Wednesday evening for a call?" Instead of "let's catch up sometime," say, "I'll message you tomorrow at 6. Specificity converts hope into action. It anchors the idea in time, which is the only place conversation can truly live. But even deeper than logistics, breaking the loop requires courage. Courage to admit that you do want to talk, not in a hypothetical someday, but in the vulnerability of now. Courage to risk that the other person might not want the same. Courage to discover that the conversation you've postponed might not give you the comfort you imagine, because real connection is not a guarantee, it's a gamble, and the loop exists to protect us from that gamble. So, here's the paradox. "We should talk more" feels like a gentle opening, but often it is the quietest form of closure. It maintains the illusion of care while sheltering you from the work of care. To mean it, you must stop saying it. To honor the desire, you must resist the placeholder. True intimacy is inconvenient, messy, time-consuming. It doesn't happen because we said it should. It happens because one day, instead of promising to talk more, we actually pick up the phone, send the first message, or sit down face-to-face and let silence turn into words. Only then does the loop break. Only then do the words stop being an escape hatch and become a doorway. And if you step through, you may find that the conversations you feared were difficult are the very ones that rebuild what you thought was gone. Grocery forgetting spiral. You've lived this moment. You walk into the grocery store with confidence, holding a neatly written list, the armor against forgetfulness. Every item is accounted for, checked and double-checked. You move through the aisles with precision. Milk, bread, fruit, detergent. You feel accomplished, organized, in control. But when you return home, unpacking bag after bag, the realization strikes like a cold slap. The one thing you actually went to the store for, the real anchor of the trip, is missing. Somehow, despite the list, despite your planning, despite your intention, the most important item has slipped through your mind's cracks. This is the grocery forgetting spiral, a loop that is not really about groceries at all, but about the fragile machinery of human attention. The paradox lies in the structure of memory itself. We believe that lists safeguard us, that writing something down transfers responsibility from brain to paper. But what happens is stranger. The act of making the list often creates a false sense of security. The brain, relieved that the burden is offloaded, relaxes its vigilance. It stops rehearsing the most important item precisely because it has been written down. But in the grocery aisles, where distractions swarm, colors, labels, smells, noise, the mind reverts to autopilot. It follows patterns, scanning shelves in habitual ways. Unless the missing item screams at you, it disappears into silence. Psychologists call this a failure of prospective memory, the ability to remember to do something in the future. Unlike remembering a past fact, prospective memory must compete with the present moment's noise. The brain is balancing navigation, decision-making, impulse control, and sensory input. In this battle, the quiet task often loses. You may even have looked at the very shelf holding your forgotten item. You may have brushed past it, certain you had everything you needed, blind to the glaring absence. But the spiral deepens. Because when you discover the forgotten item back at home, the loop begins again. You tell yourself you'll remember next time. You make a new list, more careful, more thorough. Maybe you highlight, underline, or circle the key item. Yet, the same trap unfolds. The more effort you put into ensuring you won't forget, the more shocking it feels when you do. It is as if the mind conspires against certainty, finding ways to sabotage the very thing you try to lock down. This spiral echoes far beyond grocery stores. It is present in the way we prepare for exams, meetings, or trips. A student studies for weeks but forgets the one formula most likely to appear on the test. A traveler packs carefully but leaves behind the passport. A worker spends hours fine-tuning a presentation, only to forget the flash drive containing the slides. The pattern repeats. The more we try to secure the crucial detail, the more fragile it becomes under pressure. Why? Because focus creates imbalance. The more you obsess over one thing, the more your brain distributes attention unevenly. The mind is not a perfect recorder, it is a spotlight. And the harder you shine it in one direction, the more shadows it casts elsewhere. Ironically, the attempt to highlight the key detail can push it into the dark. But there is another layer, more unsettling. Perhaps the grocery forgetting spiral reveals something existential, that human beings are designed never to be fully complete. Forgetting is not a glitch, it is a feature. It forces return, repetition, cycles of effort. If we remembered perfectly, if every need was satisfied in one trip, life would flatten into efficiency without texture. Forgetting, frustrating as it is, keeps us moving, searching, returning again and again to the ordinary rituals that shape existence. So, the next time you unpack groceries and realize the central item is missing, remember this. It is not just absent from your bag. It is present in the structure of your mind, woven into the very way memory resists total control. The spiral cannot be defeated, only recognized. And perhaps, in recognizing it, you'll see that what feels like failure is also a reminder that life itself is built not on perfection, but on the loops of imperfection that keep us human. Infinite password reset. You sit at your computer staring at the login screen. The system asks for your password, and your fingers hover over the keys with hesitation. You try once, twice, wrong. You squint, thinking hard, but the letters and numbers blur in your mind. You give up, sigh, and click forgot password. The cycle begins again. A code arrives in your inbox. You copy it. You're prompted to create something new. And so you type carefully, inventing a combination clever enough to be secure, yet strange enough to satisfy the rules. Uppercase, lowercase, special symbol, number. The system accepts. Relief washes over you. But even as you confirm the reset, a quiet dread settles in. Because deep down, you know, you will forget this one too. This is the infinite password reset, a loop that traps us in its cold logic, where memory falters and technology demands perfection. Each time you create a key to the digital vault of your life, it instantly evaporates from recall, like writing in sand just as the tide comes in. And yet, you repeat the process again and again, knowing the outcome will be the same. It is a ritual of frustration, an endless carousel of invention and erasure. Psychologically, it reveals something unsettling about memory itself. Human recall thrives on meaning, pattern, and emotion. We remember stories, faces, experiences charged with feeling. But a password is deliberately stripped of meaning. It is random, abstract, artificial. It is designed to be hard to guess, and so it becomes equally hard to remember. You may remember your childhood phone number from decades ago, the lyrics of songs you never meant to memorize, even the smell of a room from your past. Yet, a password you created yesterday already dissolves into nothing. Think of the absurdity. Your life may depend on a string of symbols, yet your mind resists holding on to them. Bank accounts, emails, medical records, all sealed behind keys you yourself cannot grasp. So you outsource your memory to sticky notes, to password managers, to the hidden corners of notebooks. But even then, the cycle finds you, because once you store it somewhere, the anxiety grows. What if you forget where you stored it? What if you lose access to the vault that holds all the other vaults? The recursion deepens, like mirrors reflecting mirrors. The lock you created to protect yourself becomes the very thing that imprisons you. And there is irony in how each reset feels like a fresh start. You tell yourself, this time, I'll remember. This time, I'll choose something clever but simple. You try mnemonics, birthdays, fragments of favorite phrases, but security rules reject them, scolding you like an unforgiving teacher. Password too weak, must include symbols, must not resemble previous. You obey, twisting the string until it barely belongs to you. And in that twisting, the connection severs. The moment you click confirm, you lose it. The key vanishes into the fog, leaving only the inevitability of another reset waiting in the near future. This loop is more than inconvenience. It is a metaphor for modern life. The more we rely on systems that demand flawless memory, the more we collide with the fragile truth of being human. We are creatures of story, not machines of precision. Our minds resist the sterile, the arbitrary, the meaningless. And yet, we are asked daily to carry dozens, even hundreds of unique combinations. Strings of nonsense that define our access to identity, work, survival. It's no wonder the brain rebels, but step back and the loop begins to feel almost existential. Isn't it the same with much of what we chase in life? We try to secure ourselves against uncertainty, against loss, against intrusion. We build layers of complexity to keep danger out. But in the process, we create walls so high that we ourselves are locked inside. The password becomes both protector and jailer. And when we reset it endlessly, we are really confronting a deeper fear that safety might always come at the price of forgetfulness, that in protecting our lives, we slowly lose the keys to living them. You may laugh at the absurdity the next time you reset a password and forget it within hours, but beneath the humor lies a haunting truth. Perhaps the infinite password reset is not just about computers. Perhaps it is a mirror of our struggle with memory, with impermanence, with the futility of trying to hold on too tightly in a world designed to make us let go. And so, you sit there, again, typing in a new string. The system accepts, you breathe, and then, like deja vu, the forgetting begins. Another loop has started. Another reset waits for you just beyond tomorrow. Career ladder Mirage. You are told from the very beginning that life is a climb, that if you move upward, rung by rung, step by step, you will one day arrive at the summit, the dream role, the title, the position that validates all the effort. And so, you begin. You study, you work, you endure the endless grind of proving yourself. Each rung of the ladder demands sacrifice. Late nights, lost weekends, the quiet erosion of your health, your relationships, your inner stillness. But through it all, you tell yourself it is worth it, because at the top of the ladder waits the reward, security, prestige, fulfillment. But when you finally near the summit, something happens. The role you chased no longer looks like what you imagined. Perhaps it has shifted, reshaped by the economy, by technology, by the changing tides of an industry that never stays still. Or perhaps it has not changed, but you have. The dream no longer feels like yours. The title you once longed for now carries a weight you do not want. And in that moment, you realize the terrible truth. The career ladder was a mirage. You were chasing something that dissolves the moment you reach for it. This is the career ladder mirage, an illusion woven deep into the fabric of modern life. It feeds on our need for direction, our craving for meaning. We are told that growth is linear, that careers are ladders to be climbed, that progress is measurable in promotions, titles, and salaries. Yet, reality is far more fluid. The role you imagine at 20 may not exist by the time you are 30. The industry you enter may transform beyond recognition, and the self that began the climb may not be the same self that arrives at the top. What you chased becomes unrecognizable, and what you reach no longer satisfies. The ladder leads you not to arrival, but to disappearance. There are countless examples. Think of the young graduate who dreams of becoming an editor at a prestigious magazine, only to find, a decade later, that the industry has collapsed into algorithms and online clicks. The role is gone, absorbed by a machine that values speed over craft. Or the engineer who devotes years to rising through the ranks, only to realize that the coveted management role means less creativity and more paperwork, less invention and more meetings. The dream was there from the ground, shimmering in the distance. But by the time the climb ended, it had vanished. The mirage always moves. And yet, we rarely question the ladder itself. We assume the problem is us. We tell ourselves we should have worked harder, sacrificed more, climbed faster. We do not see that the system was designed around shifting horizons. The top is not fixed. It moves, recedes, or reshapes just enough to keep us climbing. And so, many spend their entire lives pursuing a summit that never arrives, always believing they are one step away from fulfillment. It is a trap of perpetual striving, disguised as progress. But let us go deeper. Why do we chase the mirage at all? Perhaps because the alternative is terrifying. To stand still in a world obsessed with movement feels like failure. To step sideways rather than upward feels like betrayal. And so, we prefer the illusion of direction, even if it is false. The latter gives us the comfort of certainty. As long as we are climbing, we are not lost. Even if the destination dissolves, the act of climbing feels like meaning. The mirage sustains us, even as it deceives us. The career ladder. And Mirage also reveals something about the fragility of identity. So much of who we are is bound to what we do. Ask someone who they are, and they will tell you their job. And so, the dream role becomes more than a title. It becomes a promise of selfhood. To lose it, or to find it empty, is to feel a collapse of identity. This is why so many reach the top and feel not triumph, but emptiness. The title was never enough to carry the weight of existence. The ladder was never built to hold the fullness of a human soul. And yet, this illusion does not have to end in despair. To see the mirage clearly is also to be freed from it. Once you realize that the ladder is shifting, you can stop chasing shadows and start shaping your own path. You can move laterally, diagonally, even downward, not as failure, but as choice. You can build a career not as a climb, but as a constellation, a series of experiences, skills, and callings that form a shape unique to you. The mirage is dangerous only if you do not see it. Once you name it, you can step outside its trap. Perhaps the deeper lesson is this. Fulfillment is rarely found at the top of a ladder, but in the act of becoming, in the weaving of purpose into the everyday. The title changes, the role vanishes, but the meaning you create through your work, the lives you touch, the skills you hone, the truths you uncover, remains. The mirage dissolves, but the journey does not. And maybe that is the real summit. Not a position that disappears, but a life lived with presence, curiosity, and freedom from illusions. So, the next time you hear the call to climb, pause. Ask yourself, what waits at the top, and will it still be there when I arrive? Am I climbing for myself, or for a dream handed to me by others? The career ladder. Mirage will always shimmer in the distance, but you do not have to chase it blindly. You can step off the ladder. You can build your own ground. You can choose a path that does not vanish when reached. Fairness agreement, dispute, fairness. A word that feels simple, almost childlike. From the earliest age, we are taught to seek it, to demand it, to believe in it. That's not fair, a child cries on the playground, and the phrase echoes with a universal hunger. To live in a world that is balanced, just, equal. to live in a world where no one takes more than their share and no one is left behind. But what happens when we try to define it? What happens when everyone claims to believe in fairness, but no two people agree on what fair actually means? Imagine two siblings dividing a cake. One says fairness is splitting it exactly in half. The other says fairness is giving the bigger piece to the hungrier child. Both believe they are right. Both feel cheated if their definition is denied, and already the dispute begins, because fairness is not a fixed law of nature. It is a mirror of our values, our perspectives, our desires. What looks fair to one can look cruel to another. What feels just to you may feel like injustice to me. History is filled with examples of this endless conflict. Nations draft laws to ensure fairness, yet entire groups rise up claiming oppression. Employers design policies they believe are fair to workers, while employees feel exploited. Families try to split inheritances equally, yet heirs still fight, convinced fairness has been violated. Fairness is always promised, but rarely agreed upon. Why? Because fairness is not a single truth. It is an interpretation, filtered through experience. Think about the endless debates around equality and equity. Equality says fairness means treating everyone the same, giving each person the same resources, the same opportunities. But equity says fairness means giving people what they need, which may not be the same. To one person, fairness is identical treatment. To another, fairness is adjusted treatment to account for difference. Which is right? Both. Which is wrong? Both. The fairness dispute is built into the very definition of the word. This is why, even in intimate relationships, fairness becomes conflict. A partner may believe fairness means alternating responsibilities equally, splitting chores, bills, time. The other may believe fairness means compensating for strengths and weaknesses. If one earns more, they pay more. If one cooks better, they cook more. Both are convinced they are fair. Both feel wronged when the other disagrees. The argument is not about effort, but about meaning. Not about action, but about interpretation. Philosophers and psychologists have long wrestled with this paradox. John Rawls, the political philosopher, argued that fairness means designing rules as if you didn't know your place in society, blind to whether you'd be rich or poor, strong or weak. But others counter that life cannot be lived behind a veil of ignorance. We live with context, history, bias, emotion. Neuroscientists studying the brain have even found that our sense of fairness is tied to emotion as much as reason. Reward circuits light up when we feel treated fairly, but burn with anger when we feel cheated. Fairness is not a cold calculation. It is fire in the heart. And that is why it becomes so dangerous. When people believe fairness has been violated, they do not just disagree, they revolt. Families fracture, friendships collapse, societies erupt in protest. Wars have been fought in the name of fairness. Revolutions have been ignited by it. And yet, when the dust settles, the victors create their own system of fairness, one that others soon contest. The cycle repeats endlessly. Everyone wants fairness, no one agrees on its shape. But maybe the deeper problem is this. Fairness carries an illusion of objectivity, as if it is a single universal truth. We speak of fairness as though it were a stone law written into the cosmos. Yet it is not gravity. It is not mathematics. It is negotiation. It is interpretation. And the moment we forget that, the moment we believe our version of fairness is the only one, we turn fairness itself into tyranny. So, what are we to do? Abandon fairness altogether? Live in pure self-interest? Some try, but even the most hardened pragmatists eventually confront the human need for justice. Even children without teaching recognize unfairness. It is stitched into our biology, into our evolution as social creatures. Fairness may not be universal, but the longing for it is. The challenge is not to erase it, but to confront its ambiguity. Perhaps true fairness is not about identical outcomes or perfectly balanced scales. Perhaps it is about recognition, seeing that others may define fairness differently, and working toward mutual understanding. It may not resolve the dispute, but it softens it. It allows fairness to be less about rigid calculation and more about empathy. Because in the end, fairness is not just about what is given, it is about how it is felt. And feelings are never the same from person to person. So the next time you find yourself arguing over what is fair, whether in love, in family, in work, or in society, pause. Ask yourself, am I fighting for fairness or for my fairness? Am I seeking justice, or am I seeking my advantage disguised as justice? The distinction is subtle, but it is everything. Because once you recognize that fairness is contested, you begin to understand that it is not a finish line, but a conversation. Not a final truth, but an ongoing struggle. And maybe that is the real meaning of fairness. Not perfection, not symmetry, not agreement, but the willingness to wrestle with difference. To admit that no one owns the definition. To live inside the dispute without letting it destroy us. Because fairness is not something we arrive at. It is something we pursue, knowing it will always shift beneath us. Everyone agrees to be fair. Everyone demands fairness. But no two people agree on what fairness means. Perhaps that is not a failure of humanity, but its very condition. And perhaps the task is not to find the single definition, but to live with the multiplicity, to create a fairness that is less about perfect agreement and more about imperfect humanity. The exact change puzzle. You've felt it before. Standing at a counter, the queue behind you restless, the cashier waiting, and your pocket heavy with coins. You reach in, rattling through the metallic fragments of your daily life, confident that among the pile you will find what you need. But as you spill them into your palm, you discover the truth. Dozens of coins, none of them useful. The amount is just beyond your reach. 3 5s when you need a 10, 2 10s when you need an 8. Copper fragments that add to everything except the precise sum the universe now demands. You always have coins, yet never the right ones. This is the exact change puzzle, and it is more than just a frustration of everyday commerce. It is a mirror of how life itself unfolds. Abundance in the wrong form, scarcity in the right one. It's strange, isn't it? You're never truly empty-handed. Your wallet bulges, your pockets jingle. The evidence of resources is undeniable. Yet, when precision is called for, the resources scatter uselessly, as if mocking your need. It is as though the world conspires to remind you that possession is not the same as alignment, that having much is meaningless if it cannot be shaped into the right fit. This puzzle shows up in money, yes, but also in time. Think of a day where your calendar seems spacious. Long hours stretch ahead, but not in the right configuration. You have half an hour free, then a meeting, then 45 minutes, then another interruption. Plenty of time, scattered like coins across your pocket, yet never the exact block you need to write the story, finish the project, or rest deeply. You have time, but never the right time. It happens in conversation. You gather phrases, thoughts, rehearsed apologies, kind words stored up in your chest. But when the crucial moment arrives, the argument with someone you love, the confession of what hurts, the gratitude you wanted to show, those words never combine into the exact change of meaning. Instead, they tumble out as fragments, overlong, too short, or not spoken at all. You always have words, but not the ones required in the moment they are most needed. It happens in relationships. You might have friends who are supportive but distant, mentors who inspire but don't understand, people who love you but cannot listen, people who listen but cannot stay. Your life overflows with connections, but when you need one precise kind of presence, patience, honesty, tenderness, fire, you discover the absence. It's not that you're alone. It's that you're surrounded, yet misaligned. A handful of coins, but never the right amount. Why does this paradox keep repeating? Because reality does not bend to the mathematics of convenience. Life teaches you through these puzzles that abundance without fit is another kind of lack. The exactness you crave is rare because it demands convergence, the right thing in the right place at the right time. And convergence is the one pattern the universe seems reluctant to grant freely. Think of luck. Think of timing. Think of how entire histories pivot on whether someone had the right coin in hand, a leader with the right words, a scientist with the right tool, a stranger with the right gesture of kindness. Billions of other moments overflow with almosts, near fits, not quites. Humanity itself is built on surviving the puzzle of almost enough. And beneath it all lies the deeper truth. Exactness may not be the goal at all. Perhaps the universe, in its refusal to hand us perfect alignment, is teaching us to improvise, to overpay sometimes, to underpay and carry debt sometimes, to accept that life rarely balances to the penny. Precision is rare, but adaptability is abundant. The art is not in always having the right coin. It is in learning how to carry on when you don't. You could argue that this is why generosity matters. When you always aim for the exact change, you grip tightly, measuring out worth in rigid sums. But when you admit that the puzzle rarely resolves, you open yourself to the idea of giving more than asked, or accepting less than perfect. To live as if the coins you carry are not a trap, but an offering. Sometimes you drop the extra coin into someone else's hand, not because you had to, but because the imperfection was the point. And maybe this puzzle is also why gratitude matters. To stare at what you lack, a missing coin, a missing hour, a missing word, is to feel small. But to step back and see the abundance around you is to realize that misalignment is not emptiness. It is simply the universe nudging you to shift your angle, to rearrange the pile, to trust that wholeness can exist even without precision. Still, the frustration remains. The rattle of coins you can't spend, the clock chopped into useless fragments, the words that never quite say what you meant. It is in these moments the exact change puzzle reveals itself not as a problem to be solved, but as a mirror of human longing. We long for the perfect fit, for our resources, our time, our words, our love, to align cleanly with the demands of the world. And when they don't, we are left standing at the counter of existence, pockets full, hands open, searching for the one coin that never seems to appear. Name, recall, delay. You've been here before. You meet someone, perhaps at a party, in the office, or even at a family gathering, and in that charged moment of introduction, the mind goes blank. You fumble, misname them, or worse, introduce them with no name at all. The instant the mistake leaves your lips, the real name surges back, bright and mocking, as if it had been hiding just beyond reach, waiting for the moment of embarrassment to resurface. This is the name recall delay, a psychological loop where memory punishes you by delivering the answer only after it is too late. The mechanism is cruelly familiar. Memory, especially names, is fragile. Unlike faces, which our brains are naturally wired to recognize through specialized neural pathways, names are arbitrary. They carry no visual cues, no built-in logic, no mnemonic hooks. They are pure labels, thin threads linking identity to sound. Under pressure, those threads snap easily. Stress amplifies the forgetting, because in social situations, the stakes are high. You want to appear attentive, respectful, competent, but it is precisely that pressure which causes the retrieval system in your brain to jam, like a key stuck in the wrong lock. What happens next is what makes the phenomenon so frustrating. The moment you walk away when the pressure has dissolved, the name bursts into your awareness with infuriating clarity. You don't even have to search for it. It just appears, as if mocking you. This is not coincidence. Psychologists call it the tip-of-the-tongue phenomenon. The brain knows the information, but stress and distraction block the retrieval path. Once the pressure lifts, the neural blockade dissolves, and the answer flows freely. But by then, the damage is done. We see this everywhere in daily life. You're introducing a colleague to another and suddenly call them by the wrong name. You know their real name, of course you do, but in that critical second, the wrong one slips out. Later, when it no longer matters, the real name arrives. Or you bump into someone at the store, someone you haven't seen in years. You're certain you recognize them, but the name is buried. You talk, awkwardly skirting around it, only for their name to strike you like lightning 10 minutes after parting ways. The delay always arrives with precision timing, always too late. There's a deeper loop here, because the more you worry about forgetting, the more you actually forget. Anticipatory anxiety clogs the retrieval system. You stand there silently chanting to yourself, remember their name, and in doing so, you guarantee its disappearance. Then, when you finally relax, the memory emerges clean and whole. It is the same irony as trying to fall asleep by forcing sleep. The act of effort itself blocks the very thing you seek. The name recall. Delay also reveals a truth about identity. We like to believe we know people, that names are simple handles to grasp them by. Yet, the very fact that names are the first thing to slip away shows how unstable they are in memory. Perhaps our brains resist pinning people down to single words, reminding us that identity is richer, deeper, harder to compress into a label. The loop exposes the fragility of how we categorize others, and how easily that categorization collapses under stress. Think of it like this. Your mind is a library, and the name is a book you know exists. In the silence of solitude, you can walk the aisles and find it. But when all eyes are on you, when the librarian is staring, waiting, the aisles blur, the shelves vanish, and the book disappears. Only later, when you've left the library, does the title suddenly come to you. The library never lost the book. You simply couldn't retrieve it under pressure. And yet, this loop is not just about memory failure, it is about humility. It reminds us of the limits of control. No matter how intelligent, prepared, or self-aware we are, our brains will betray us at times, exposing the gap between what we know and what we can perform. Perhaps that is why the name recall delay feels so universal. It humbles us into remembering that human cognition is not a perfect machine, but a living, stuttering process. The next time you forget someone's name in the moment, and remember it only in the silence afterward, know this: you are caught in the paradox of memory's timing. It is not that you didn't know, it is that knowing doesn't always arrive when it's needed most. And maybe that is the deeper lesson of the name recall delay, that in human connection, it isn't flawless recall that defines us, but how we recover from our stumbles, how we laugh, how we continue despite the imperfection of memory. The umbrella curse. You wake in the morning, glance at the clouds, and debate whether to bring the umbrella. The forecast is vague, a chance of showers, a phrase so indecisive it might as well be a shrug. You hesitate. Do you carry the umbrella, weighing down your bag, occupying your hand, burdening you with the expectation of rain? Or do you risk it, stepping outside light and free? And here is where the trap begins. Because if you carry it, the sky remains stubbornly clear, mocking your caution with endless sunshine. But if you leave it behind, that's when the heavens open, unleashing a downpour as if they were waiting for your mistake. This is the umbrella curse, an everyday superstition born from the strange intersection of psychology, probability, and the cruel humor of chance. The curse feels so real because it repeats itself with eerie precision. Everyone has lived the irony. You trudge through the day with an unused umbrella, wondering why you even bothered. Or worse, you're caught unprepared, clothes drenched, shoes ruined, muttering to yourself that the rain knew you'd left it behind. Of course, rain doesn't know. But our minds are wired to seek patterns, to connect events, to find meaning in coincidence. This is the same instinct that sees faces in clouds, luck in numbers, omens in accidents. The umbrella curse is less about weather and more about the deep human suspicion that the universe responds to us personally, that it is watching, waiting, and timing its tricks to our smallest choices. There's also a hidden bias at work, what psychologists call confirmation bias. You remember the times the curse struck because they were dramatic. You don't remember the dozens of days you carried an umbrella and it rained, or the times you left it and the skies stayed clear. The memory favors the story that feels alive. And so each fresh incident strengthens the myth. We joke about it, but secretly we half believe. After all, who hasn't had the uncanny sense that the world enjoys catching you unprepared? But perhaps the umbrella curse reveals something deeper than superstition. At its core, it exposes our endless struggle with uncertainty. The umbrella is not just an object, it's a symbol of preparation, of control, of trying to predict the unpredictable. Carrying it is an attempt to outwit chance, to insulate yourself from chaos. Yet the irony is cruel. Preparedness feels wasted when nothing happens, while unpreparedness feels catastrophic when everything does. In either case, you are trapped. The umbrella becomes a token of anxiety, a reminder that no matter what you do, the future will always defy you in some way. Isn't this the same tension that governs much of life? Think of the job interview you overprepared for, only to be asked questions you never studied. Think of the speech you rehearsed endlessly, but the projector failed instead. Think of the appointment you didn't bother to plan for, assuming nothing would matter, only to regret it when everything did. The umbrella curse is not about rain. It's about the impossible task of predicting life. It's about the way preparation both comforts us and betrays us, leaving us always one step behind the whims of chance. There's also a poetic irony in how the umbrella itself changes the experience. When you carry it, you walk differently, less rushed, less fearful of the sky. When you forget it, every cloud looms larger. Every wind gust feels threatening. The same weather feels different depending on the choices you made before stepping outside. In this way, the curse is partly self-created. It's not just that rain falls when you're unprepared. It's that unpreparedness magnifies the rain, turning a drizzle into a catastrophe. And maybe that is the hidden wisdom inside the curse. Life will always ambush you in some way. If not with rain, then with something else. You can carry the umbrella and risk the burden of unused caution, or leave it behind and risk the sting of regret. Either way, you learn something about your relationship with control. You cannot win against uncertainty, but you can choose how to meet it. So the next time you hesitate at the door, umbrella in hand, ask yourself what you're really carrying. Is it just a shield against rain? Or is it a fragile charm against the unpredictability of life itself? Maybe the sky is indifferent. Maybe the rain has no timing. Or maybe the umbrella curse is simply the voice of fate reminding you, no matter how you prepare, you will always walk beneath a sky that belongs to no one. Callback paradox. The phone rings. A name flashes across your screen. For a moment you hesitate. Maybe you're in the middle of something. Maybe you don't hear it in time. Maybe you simply let it pass. The call fades into silence. Minutes later, you pick up the phone and dial back. But now, it is their turn to miss you. They don't answer. And when they try again, you miss them once more. Back and forth. An endless loop of almost connections. Two voices circling each other but never meeting. Trapped in a paradox that feels as if the universe itself is conspiring to keep you apart. This is the callback paradox. A strange, familiar frustration that hides beneath the surface of everyday life. On paper, it is nothing mysterious. Two people call at slightly different times, and the missed signals align in unfortunate ways. But when you live inside it, it feels uncanny. It feels personal. It feels like the universe knows the very moment you reach out and shifts the timing just enough to ensure you miss one another again. What begins as inconvenience soon becomes absurdity. You ask yourself, is this just bad luck, or is something else at work? There is something almost cruel in the rhythm of it. The moment you answer, they are gone. The moment they are free, you are not. And in the silence between rings, you begin to feel the weight of absence. You are reminded of how fragile connection really is, how much it depends on timing, on alignment, on the perfect overlap of attention. A conversation, after all, is not just words. It is a coincidence of two lives intersecting in the same moment. And the callback paradox shows us just how easily that coincidence can fail. Psychologists might call this an example of synchronization failure, a breakdown in the alignment of signals. Two people attempt to connect, but their rhythms are out of step. Like dancers moving to different tempos, they circle the same floor without ever colliding. Technology only makes this more visible. The phone, designed to bridge distance, also exposes the fragility of human timing. And yet, the emotional weight it carries is far greater than a mere technicality. It feels like a reminder that connection, in all its forms, is never guaranteed. Think about how this same rhythm plays out in other corners of life. You reach out to a friend when they are busy, and they reach for you when you are not there. You confess feelings to someone after they have moved on, only to discover they once felt the same way when you were blind to it. Opportunities arrive just after you've let go of them, and vanish just before you are ready. The callback paradox is not only about telephones. It is about the misalignment of human lives, about how easily timing turns into tragedy. And yet, there is also something deeply symbolic here. A phone call is a bridge, a way of collapsing distance into presence. To miss it, to circle it endlessly, is to be trapped at the edge of connection without ever stepping inside. It echoes a deeper fear. What if all of life is a series of missed calls? What if the things meant for us arrive when we cannot answer? What if destiny itself is structured like a phone we never quite manage to pick up at the right time? The callback paradox unsettles us because it feels like a metaphor for existence, always reaching, never quite arriving. But perhaps there is another layer still. The endless loop of missed calls teaches us something about control. We like to believe that communication is simple: dial, answer, connect. But in truth, it requires alignment, timing, synchronicity that lies beyond our power. No matter how advanced our tools, we cannot force two people to exist in the same moment of readiness. The paradox reminds us that we do not command time, we move within it. The universe does not bend to our desire for instant response. Sometimes, no matter how many times we call, silence will answer. And yet, inside that silence lies its own strange beauty. For each missed call is also a reminder of how much connection matters. The frustration of the loop reveals the hunger we carry for presence, for voice, for the reassurance of another human being on the line. The paradox hurts only because we care. It unsettles us only because it highlights the fragile miracle of communication itself. How improbable it is that two people, in a vast world, find one another at all. Perhaps the lesson of the callback paradox is not to force alignment, but to surrender to it. To accept that sometimes connection will arrive late, sometimes too early, sometimes not at all. To know that missed calls are not failures, but part of the larger rhythm of timing we cannot always command. Because eventually, the loop does break. Eventually, one call finds its answer. And when it does, the relief, the resonance, feels even stronger because of the silence that came before. So the next time you are caught in that endless loop, dialing back only to miss each other again, pause for a moment. See it not just as frustration, but as a mirror. A reminder that life itself is full of these near misses, these almost connections, and that patience, not panic, is the only way through. Because when the line finally clears, when the timing finally aligns, the conversation that follows carries all the weight of what was missed. And in that moment, you realize the paradox was never meant to last forever. It was meant to remind you that connection, when it comes, is a gift, and that every answered call is rarer than it seems. Furniture fit illusion. In the store, it looked flawless. The dimensions seemed just right. You stood before it, measuring it with your eyes, running your hand across the surface, imagining it inside your home. It fit perfectly in that wide, open showroom, lit with polished lights and surrounded by endless space. You signed the receipt, confident that this was meant to be. And then, when delivery day arrives, reality reveals its cruel trick. The furniture won't fit through your front door. It is too wide for the hallway, too tall for the ceiling, too heavy for the stairs. What once seemed perfect is now impossible. This is the furniture fit illusion, when something appears ideal in one context, but becomes completely unworkable in another. At first, it feels like a minor inconvenience, a simple frustration. But this illusion reveals something far larger about human perception. Context changes everything. What works in one space, one time, one situation, does not always translate to another. The showroom of life is vast and spacious, designed to seduce you into thinking the world can accommodate your desires. But when you try to bring those desires into your actual life, the tight doorways, the narrow halls, the everyday limitations, you discover that what seemed perfect was only perfect somewhere else. Think about the choices we make under the glow of imagined possibility. The job offer that seemed like the right fit until you actually lived through the daily grind of it. The relationship that seemed effortless in the first weeks, only to strain under the narrow doorways of real conflict and compromise. The dream purchase that felt achievable when pictured in your mind, but collapses under the weight of your actual finances. In every case, the illusion is the same. It looks right in one setting, but life has doorways, constraints, limits that strip away fantasy and reveal reality. Psychologists call this the context effect. We evaluate things differently depending on the environment in which we encounter them. In the spacious store, a massive sofa looks modest. In your living room, it becomes overwhelming. Under the glow of a new romance, flaws appear charming. Under the daily pressures of routine, they become irritants. In the freedom of a classroom, ideas feel boundless. In the restrictions of a workplace, they feel impossible. We believe we are making rational choices, but really, we are being shaped by the space around us. Even entire societies fall victim to this illusion. Policies that seem fair and functional in theoretical debates collapse when they pass through the doorways of real human lives. Economic models designed in academic halls fail in the messy corridors of actual economies. Ideologies that inspire in grand speeches crack when squeezed into the reality of human behavior. The illusion is everywhere. Things fit in theory, in concept, in display, but not in practice. And the pain comes not only from the failure itself, but from the betrayal of expectation. You thought you chose well. You thought you measured carefully. You thought you prepared. And yet, reality humbles you. The sofa cannot enter. The plan cannot unfold. The dream cannot live as imagined. The doorway, literal or metaphorical, exposes the truth. Not every perfect fit is truly a fit, but this illusion also carries a hidden wisdom. It teaches us that perfection cannot be judged in isolation. It must be judged in context. It is not enough to ask, does this look good? Does this feel right? Does this inspire me? we must also ask, will this fit my life? Will this fit through the narrow corridors of my reality? Will this survive the constraints that every dream must endure? This is why some of our greatest regrets come not from wrong desires, but from unexamined desires. We wanted something that looked perfect on the showroom floor of imagination, but we never tested whether it could live in our actual homes, our actual lives, our actual hearts. We discover too late that beauty without fit becomes burden, that promise without context becomes disappointment. And yet, it would be a mistake to say the answer is never to dream, never to reach. The truth is subtler. The wisdom is not in avoiding choices, but in learning to measure differently, to carry the doorframe in your mind when you stand in the showroom, to remember that life is not an open display room, but a house full of angles, edges, and limitations, to realize that the real skill is not finding something perfect, but finding something that truly fits. But here is where the metaphor deepens. Sometimes, it is not the furniture that must change, it is the doorway. Sometimes, we must widen our lives to fit what matters. Growth often means expanding the narrow corridors of our habits, breaking down the doorframes of fear, reshaping the walls of limitation. What seems impossible today may become possible if we are willing to reconstruct ourselves, to carve out more space for what we desire. The illusion may reveal a failure, but it can also invite transformation. So, the furniture fit illusion is not only about couches and cabinets. It is about every choice, every dream, every path we imagine. It asks us to see beyond the showroom, beyond the glow of possibility, into the real doorways of our lives. It warns us that context matters, that reality humbles imagination. But it also whispers that sometimes the solution is not to abandon the dream, but to reshape the doorway. In the end, the illusion reminds us of this. A fit is not a quality of the object alone. It is a relationship between the object and its space, between the dream and the life that must contain it. And if we do not learn to respect that relationship, we will always be standing in front of our doors, holding something that looked perfect once, but now feels like a mistake. So the next time you stand before a choice that looks flawless, pause. Ask yourself not only how it looks in the store, but how it will live in your home. Not only how it feels in imagination, but how it will survive in reality. And most of all, ask whether you are willing to adjust not just the dream, but the doorway itself. Because sometimes the illusion is a warning, and sometimes it is an invitation to measure better, to live wiser, to build larger. Instruction, confusion, effect. Picture this. You are driving late at night, headlights slicing through a maze of unfamiliar streets. Your phone's map guides you in a calm, robotic voice. Turn left, then right, then continue for 2 kilometers. You obey every command with precision, clinging to the promise that following instructions guarantees arrival. Yet, when you finally stop, the place before you is not your destination. You're in the middle of a dead-end street, or staring at a warehouse instead of the cafe you were promised. You did everything right. You followed directions exactly. And still, you are lost. This is the instruction confusion effect, the eerie paradox where obedience does not equal success, where precision in following rules delivers only misplacement. And it extends far beyond roads and maps. Think of school. You study the textbook, memorize the formulas, answer the practice questions exactly as the teacher showed. Test day comes, and suddenly the questions twist slightly, the phrasing bends, the familiar patterns dissolve. You followed the directions to the letter, but the answers do not match. The rules you mastered were not the ones life decided to test. Or, in work, you execute a task exactly as instructed, every bullet point checked, every detail aligned. Yet the boss says, "That's not what I wanted." You protest, "But I did everything you said." They shrug. Because what people give as directions is rarely identical to what they actually expect. Hidden assumptions live between the lines. Unspoken context steers the outcome. You followed words, but words were not the map. You needed the intention behind them. The instruction confusion effect shows us the gap between map and territory. A set of directions is not reality itself. It is a compression, a simplified path, stripped of nuance. When you obey the map too faithfully, you forget that the world can shift beneath it. Roads close, buildings vanish. People change their minds. The same step-by-step guide that worked yesterday collapses today. And yet, we cling to instructions because they give us the illusion of certainty. Consider relationships. Advice columns, self-help books, even well-meaning friends often offer rules. Text back within this time frame. Use these words. Avoid those. You follow them religiously, hoping the recipe will yield connection. But the heart is not a machine. You arrive at disappointment, wondering why the rules betrayed you. It is because love and friendship do not obey fixed formulas. They require improvisation, attentiveness, risk. You can follow instructions perfectly and still land in the wrong place because the place itself is alive, changing with every heartbeat. There is also something deeper here, an existential undertone. We live in a society obsessed with manuals, systems, life hacks. We are told, follow this diet, this morning routine, this step-by-step plan for success, and happiness will arrive at your door. We crave blueprints because they protect us from chaos. But when we follow them too literally, we discover their hollowness. Someone else's map cannot chart the landscape of your own life. The confusion is not failure, it is revelation. A reminder that existence is not a formula to be obeyed, but a terrain to be explored. Psychology even offers a clue as to why this paradox frustrates us so deeply. Humans have what researchers call the just world bias, the belief that effort should equal reward, that obedience should equal success. When the instruction confusion effect strikes, it violates that expectation. We followed the path, so why did the path betray us? The discomfort is not just inconvenience, it is cognitive dissonance, a fracture in the story we tell ourselves about fairness. And yet, perhaps the puzzle is less about failure and more about awakening. If you always arrived exactly where directions promised, you would never learn to trust your own judgment. You would never lift your eyes from the page, the screen, the instructions to ask, where am I really? What do I see, smell, feel right now? What does this path ask of me beyond the script? Getting lost teaches improvisation. Being misled forces perception. Confusion is not the end of the journey. It is the moment the real journey begins. Think of explorers who once charted oceans. They left ports with maps that were little more than guesses, sketches of coastlines, instructions handed down from others who thought they knew. If they had followed every mark blindly, they would have vanished into myth. But the ones who survived were those who recognized when the instructions stopped matching the horizon. They corrected course not by obedience, but by observation. Their wrong turns became discoveries. Their confusion became history. So, the instruction confusion effect is not just a glitch in navigation. It is a metaphor for living. You can follow directions exactly and still arrive at the wrong place because the world is not static. It shifts. It hides. It demands participation, not just compliance. The instructions may take you part of the way, but at some point you must lift your eyes, step off the script, and let intuition, curiosity, and courage guide the rest. And maybe that is the deeper truth. The wrong place is not always wrong. Sometimes it is where you were meant to be, not because the directions failed, but because they delivered you to a path you would never have chosen otherwise. The cafe you missed leads you to the stranger you meet at the wrong door. The job you botched opens space for the career you never imagined. The conversation that didn't follow the script becomes the one that changes your life. The map lies, the rules falter, the directions betray. But in the betrayal is freedom. Freedom to discover that sometimes the place you end up, unexpected, unplanned, confusing, is exactly the place you needed all along. The sleep chase. You lie in bed, the lights turned low, the world around you quiet, and yet your mind refuses to surrender. You want nothing more than to drift into sleep, to sink into that soft oblivion where thought dissolves into dream. But the more you chase it, the further it runs. You adjust your pillow, slow your breathing. Close your eyes tightly, as if forcing them shut will somehow trick your brain. Still, sleep hovers just out of reach, taunting you with its absence. Hours slip away, the clock becomes an enemy, and exhaustion deepens into frustration. Then, perversely, the very next day, in the middle of a meeting, during a lecture, or while waiting at a train station, sleep finally arrives, not when you need it, but when you shouldn't have it. This is the cruel paradox of the sleep chase. The harder you try to sleep, the more impossible it becomes, and the more you resist it, the easier it overtakes you. The human mind treats sleep unlike any other action. You cannot will it. You cannot force it. Sleep is not commanded, it is allowed. It comes only when you step out of its way. But here lies the trap. The more important sleep becomes, the harder it is to surrender. Before an exam, a flight, an interview, or a critical day, the very need for rest becomes the barrier to achieving it. Your mind, instead of drifting, begins to spin, calculating how many hours are left, how much damage each passing minute will cause. Sleep transforms into a performance you must ace, and under pressure, the performance collapses. Psychologists call this paradoxical intention, the act of trying not to think about something, or trying too hard to force something natural, creates the opposite result. It is the same logic that makes you stumble when you concentrate too much on walking, or makes you forget a word the harder you try to recall it. Sleep obeys this cruel rule. The more you want it, the less it comes. And yet, when you are not looking for it, when you are sitting at your desk, riding on a bus, or watching television, sleep slips in easily, like an uninvited guest. This chase reveals a deeper truth about control. Human beings want mastery over their own minds, but sleep refuses to obey the whip. It reminds us that some of the most essential parts of existence, breathing, healing, dreaming, are not under conscious control. They are acts of surrender, not command. The harder you grip, the more they slip away. The paradox expands further. Think of the insomniac who tries every ritual: herbal teas, white noise, perfect pillows, blackout curtains, believing that the right combination will unlock the gates of rest. But each attempt reinforces the pressure. What if this doesn't work? What if I'm awake all night? The rituals themselves become chains, reminders of the very thing they are meant to ease. And still, the insomniac will find themselves dozing off unintentionally, on the couch, during a dull conversation, or while scrolling on their phone, proving that sleep was never gone, only hiding from the force of pursuit. There is something almost poetic in this cruelty. Sleep behaves like a shy animal. It approaches only when you stop chasing it. You must pretend not to care, look away, soften your grip, and only then does it curl itself beside you. In this way, the sleep chase teaches something larger about life itself, that the things we most desperately want, peace, clarity, love, rest, are often the very things that flee when hunted too hard. They appear instead when we let them, when we create the space rather than demand the result. And so, the chase continues. You can't sleep the night before a journey, but you can collapse into slumber the moment you're on the plane. You can't sleep when the room is silent, but you doze off during a film you've been waiting to watch. You can't sleep when tomorrow demands it, but you drift away in the still, inconvenient hours when sleep has no value. It is as if sleep enjoys mocking your need, reminding you that you are not its master. The paradox of the sleep chase is not just about rest, it is about surrender. It shows that not everything in life can be forced into obedience. Some things arrive only when invited gently, when we release the grip of control. To stop chasing, to accept the wakefulness, is paradoxically the first step to being carried into sleep's arms. Perhaps that is why sleep comes so easily at the wrong times, because those are the moments when we are not trying, not grasping, not counting the hours. Those are the moments when we are finally, unknowingly, ready to let go. Perfect plan collapse. You sit down with determination, convinced that this time you will get everything right. You draft the schedule, outline every step, anticipate every obstacle, and prepare contingencies for every imaginable problem. You polish the plan until it gleams like a flawless blueprint, and in that moment, you feel safe, certain, untouchable. Yet, when the day arrives, the universe seems to conspire against you. The printer jams, the colleague you relied on gets sick, the weather shifts, the timing unravels, and the small variables you dismissed swell into disasters. The harder you work to make it perfect, the more spectacularly it collapses. This is the cruel paradox of the perfect plan collapse, the unsettling reality that the more we try to exert absolute control, the more fragile everything becomes. At first glance, it seems unfair, even malicious. Why should planning make things worse? Isn't foresight supposed to protect us from chaos? And yet, the evidence is everywhere. Weddings meticulously prepared fall prey to sudden mishaps, while spontaneous gatherings run effortlessly smooth. Projects built on endless meetings and forecasts derail at the smallest hiccup, while those sketched loosely on the back of a napkin succeed by improvisation. Life seems to mock the overprepared, as if certainty itself attracts ruin. One reason is psychological rigidity. When you plan too carefully, you unconsciously narrow your options. You expect the script to unfold exactly as written, and so, when the unexpected inevitably arrives, you freeze. Instead of adapting, you panic because the script had no room for improvisation. The plan collapses not because planning is bad, but because perfection allows no oxygen for flexibility. Ironically, the more carefully you design a plan, the more brittle it becomes. There is also an illusion at work. The more details you control, the more you begin to believe you've controlled everything. But the universe always holds variables you cannot predict. A delayed train, a sudden storm, a human emotion you didn't anticipate. And because you've invested so much faith in the structure of your plan, the disruption feels catastrophic. If you had been looser, more open, you might have absorbed it. But in the pursuit of perfection, you traded resilience for precision. Think of the ancient military strategist who drafts the flawless campaign, believing the enemy will follow his expectations. But the battlefield always resists prediction. As the old saying goes, no plan survives first contact. History is littered with grand strategies that failed because they were too perfect, too confident, too fragile to bend. And yet, smaller adaptive forces often prevailed, not because they planned less, but because they held their plans lightly. We see this in daily life as well. You plan the perfect dinner date, reserve the table, arrange the lighting, rehearse what you'll say. Yet, when the evening arrives, a spilled drink or a wrong turn derails the illusion. Meanwhile, the unplanned walk in the rain, the improvised moment at a food stall, becomes unforgettable. The very act of trying to force perfection squeezes out the space where life actually lives. The perfect plan, collapse also exposes something darker. Our hunger for control is at its core a refusal to accept uncertainty. We plan not just to organize, but to defend ourselves against the chaos of existence. Yet, chaos is inevitable. Plans do not remove it. They simply create a more dramatic stage for its entrance. When the unexpected arrives, it doesn't just inconvenience us, it humiliates us, reminding us of the futility of pretending to command the future. And perhaps this is why the collapse feels so devastating. It is not just the failure of the plan, but the shattering of the illusion that we were ever in control at all. The harder you grip, the more the world slips through your fingers. The more flawless the blueprint, the more fragile the structure. But within this collapse lies a strange kind of wisdom. Maybe the goal was never to design a perfect plan, but to learn how to dance when the plan dissolves. Maybe true preparation is not about eliminating uncertainty, but about practicing the art of adapting when uncertainty arrives. The perfect plan will always collapse, not because you failed, but because perfection itself is an impossible demand in a living, changing world. So the next time you find yourself drafting every detail, convinced that you can lock the future into place, pause for a moment. Ask yourself if you are planning to live, or if you are planning to avoid living. Because life is not the plan, it is what crashes through it, what survives the collapse, what grows in the cracks when certainty breaks apart. The perfect plan. Collapse is not a curse, but a reminder. The tighter you hold the script, the sooner the page will tear. And maybe the only plan worth keeping is the one that knows how to let go. Pen disappearance phenomenon. There is a quiet mystery that unfolds on desks, in bags, in drawers across the world. You buy a pack of pens, not one, not two, but 10, 20, maybe even more. You scatter them across your spaces, believing abundance will protect you from scarcity. With so many pens at hand, how could you ever be without one? And yet, somehow, they begin to vanish, one by one, silently, invisibly. By the time you reach for one, the drawer is empty, the bag is bare, the desk offers nothing. The strange paradox emerges. The more pens you own, the faster they seem to disappear. This is the pen disappearance phenomenon, a small everyday riddle that unsettles more than it should. Because pens are not precious. They are not treasures worth hiding. And yet, they behave like secrets, slipping from your grasp, evaporating from existence. Where do they go? Into pockets that never return them? Into the hands of strangers who borrow and forget? Into the cracks of couches, the corners of bags, the hidden folds of time itself? The mystery is not just that they vanish, but that they vanish faster when there are more of them. Scarcity breeds caution, abundance breeds carelessness, and in that gap, the pens dissolve. Psychologists might explain this as a trick of perception. When you own only one pen, you guard it with vigilance. You know where it is at all times because losing it would cost you everything. But when you own 10, each one feels disposable. You set them down without thought, lend them without pause, leave them scattered in spaces you will never check again. And so, they slip away. Not because the world conspires to steal them, but because your mind devalues them. The more pens you own, the less any single one matters. And in that apathy, they vanish. But the phenomenon feels larger than psychology. It feels like the universe itself is playing tricks. How many times have you found yourself searching endlessly for a pen, tearing through drawers, checking bags, certain you bought a new pack only days ago? How many times have you reached for one in urgency, only to find every last one gone? It feels uncanny, as though pens obey a law of disappearance the moment they are needed most. They vanish not evenly, not predictably, but at the exact moment you demand them. They dissolve in the gap between intention and action, and perhaps that is why this small event resonates so deeply. The pen disappearance phenomenon is not just about pens. It is about the way abundance slips into scarcity, the way things we thought plentiful reveal themselves to be fragile. It mirrors the patterns of life itself. Money, time, even love. The more we believe we have, the less carefully we guard it. And so, it leaks away. We mistake abundance for permanence, only to discover how quickly it can vanish. Pens are just the everyday symbol of this larger truth. Think of time. When you are young, you feel you have endless years, endless hours. You spend them freely, casually, as if they are infinite. But as the years vanish, you realize they were dissolving all along. The more you had, the faster they slipped away. Or, think of relationships. When you believe someone will always be there, you take their presence for granted. Only when they are gone do you realize how easily abundance disappears. The pen is small, trivial, but it whispers the same lesson. Nothing is safe simply because it is many. There is also something almost mystical in the way pens vanish into the world. They do not rot. They do not evaporate. Yet they are gone as if absorbed into the fabric of reality itself. Perhaps they migrate invisibly into the spaces of others. A pen lent becomes a pen lost, transferred into another story, another hand, another desk. Perhaps pens live secret second lives, scattered like seeds across the world, each one leaving your possession only to sprout meaning elsewhere. In this way, the pen disappearance phenomenon is not just theft, but transformation. Your pens are not gone. They are simply no longer yours. And maybe this is why the phenomenon feels so human. We too are scattered like pens. We slip from the places where we were expected to remain. We vanish from someone's drawer, someone's memory, someone's life. And yet, in another place to another person, we reappear. The vanishing of pens is not just an inconvenience. It is a mirror of transience, a reminder of how nothing belongs to us forever, no matter how many we hold. But what can be done? Some fight the phenomenon with rituals. They buy special holders, assign pens to specific locations, engrave names on them, tether them to desks. Yet still they vanish. Others surrender, buying new packs again and again, feeding the cycle, knowing it cannot be broken. And in that surrender lies a strange peace. To accept the vanishing is to accept impermanence itself. To laugh at the disappearance is to laugh at life's small absurdities. Because in the end, it is not about the pen. It is about the reminder that possession is temporary. Abundance is fragile, and vigilance is the only way to hold what matters. The next time you find yourself searching for a pen that should be there but is not, pause. Notice the absurdity, the déjà vu of it. Recognize that you are living inside the pen disappearance phenomenon, and let it remind you of the larger truth. The things you believe will always remain are often the first to vanish. Abundance does not guarantee permanence, and sometimes, the more you have, the faster it slips away. Book Q Overflow. You close the final page of a book, that quiet satisfaction of having completed a journey. The story lingers, the lessons echo, the emotions leave their afterglow. For a brief moment, you feel complete. And then, almost immediately, your eyes fall on the stack waiting beside you. 3 more books stare back, unopened, unread, demanding your attention. Somehow, finishing one does not mean completion. It means continuation. The queue does not shrink, it multiplies. This is the paradox of the book queue overflow. where every ending births new beginnings and the pursuit of knowledge becomes endless. On the surface, it seems harmless, even noble. After all, what is wrong with having too many books to read? Isn't it a sign of curiosity, of hunger, of growth? And it is. But underneath that growing pile lies a deeper truth about our minds. We live in an age where the supply of information is infinite, but our time is finite. For every book we finish, 10 more wait at the threshold. For every story we complete, countless others whisper for attention. We chase completion, but completion never arrives. There is an old Japanese word for this, tsundoku, the art of buying books and letting them pile up, unread, as symbols of intention. Shelves lined with promises of future journeys, stacks leaning precariously like towers of postponed dreams. To some, this is indulgence, a clutter of unfinished business. But to others, it is possibility itself, a library not of the past, but of the future. Each book waiting is a world not yet entered, a self not yet discovered. The overflow is both burden and blessing. Psychologists might say this reveals our fear of missing out, our anxiety that without constant consumption, we will fall behind. We are taught to equate knowledge with progress, and so we hoard it, as if wisdom were a commodity to be stockpiled. But books are not like coins to be collected. They are like doors to be walked through. And no matter how many doors we gather, we can only walk through one at a time. The overflow reminds us of this painful truth. The life we have is too short for all the knowledge available. Every choice of one book is the sacrifice of another. And yet, there is beauty in this imperfection. To always have more waiting is to always have more to live for. Imagine the opposite, finishing your last book, with nothing left to read, no horizons left unexplored. The very abundance we call overwhelming is also the abundance that keeps us alive. The book queue overflow is not failure. It is a reflection of our boundless curiosity, our refusal to let life narrow into completion. But this overflow also mirrors something larger about existence itself. Think of how often life works this way. You finish one task and 3 more appear. You solve one problem and 2 more emerge. You reach one goal and new ones immediately sprout in its place. Completion is not an end, but a cycle. Life does not shrink as we progress. It expands. Every horizon crossed reveals more horizons beyond it, just as every book finished reveals more books worth reading. Still, the overflow can weigh heavily on us. The pile becomes guilt. The unread books become accusations. You glance at the stack and feel inadequate, as though you are failing your own curiosity. But perhaps this guilt comes from a misunderstanding. We treat the queue as something to conquer, to complete, to finish. But what if the purpose was never completion? What if the purpose is to live inside the overflow, to accept that the abundance of stories is not a problem, but a gift? Consider this. A library is not meant to be finished. It is meant to surround you, to remind you of infinite possibility. To finish a library would be to erase its meaning. The overflow is not an error in the system. It is the very design. Because books are not there simply to be consumed. They are there to remind us that there is always more. More to learn, more to feel, more to question, more to become. So when you finish one book and see 3 more waiting, do not despair. See it instead as proof of an abundant life. See it as the world whispering that there is always more to discover, that you will never be empty-handed in your search for meaning. The overflow is not a failure of time. It is a sign of richness, a reminder that no matter how much you consume, the universe will always exceed you. But there is also a warning in it, because in the endless pursuit of the next book, the next story, the next idea, we risk losing the depth of what we already have. We skim the surface of many instead of diving deeply into a few. We collect instead of absorb. We race through chapters as though speed could substitute for transformation. And in this way, the overflow tempts us into believing that knowledge is in the pile itself, rather than in the slow digestion of what we hold. So, perhaps the answer lies in balance, to accept the overflow as natural, but not let it enslave us, to read not out of guilt, but out of wonder, to know that we will never finish the queue, and that this is not tragedy, but freedom. Because the point of books was never to conquer them, it was to let them change us, one at a time. In the end, the book queue overflow is a mirror of life's infinite complexity. You finish one chapter, one season, one task, and new ones arrive. There is no final page until the very end of existence itself, and maybe that is the point. To live not for the completion, but for the continuation. To let the overflow remind us that we are part of something endless, that no matter how many stories we consume, the greater story will always remain larger than us. So close your book with gratitude. Look at the stack waiting with humility. And remember, the goal was never to finish them all. The goal was to be transformed by the ones you do touch, to live not in pursuit of ending, but in the richness of overflow. Recipe, replication, failure. You measure each ingredient with meticulous care, the flour leveled, the salt pinched precisely, the oil shimmering at just the right temperature. You follow the recipe line by line as though it were a spell, each step an incantation meant to summon the exact same magic you once tasted. And yet, when you lift the spoon to your lips, it betrays you. The dish is familiar but dulled, too sharp here, too bland there. The memory of the first time lingers like a ghost, and this time, no matter how faithfully you obey the recipe, the ghost will not return. This is the recipe replication failure, a paradox woven into both cooking and life. The strange truth that repetition never quite recreates the first spark. Why does this happen? On the surface, you might say ingredients vary. Tomatoes sweeter one week, onions sharper the next, flour milled finer or coarser, oil fresher or older. Even the water from your tap carries subtle shifts of mineral that bend taste. The environment changes, the humidity of the air, the heat of the room, the seasoning of the pan. Precision cannot guard against flux, because flux is the essence of reality. But the deeper truth is psychological. That first bite was not just flavor, it was discovery. Your senses were wide open, surprised, unprepared, alive to the novelty of it. The mind elevates first encounters, carving them into memory with more intensity. The second time, you aren't tasting the dish alone. You're tasting the echo of the memory. You measure not against the recipe, but against an idealized past that no stove, no seasoning, no hand can exactly reproduce. The food itself didn't fail. The memory inflated. This paradox extends far beyond the kitchen. Think of music. You hear a song for the first time, and it floods you with awe, chills crawling down your spine. The second listen is still good, but the shock has gone. The spell weakens, not because the song changed, but because you did. You cannot unknow what you've already known. The freshness evaporates. Think of love. The first date with someone who stirs your soul is electric. Every glance, every laugh, every accidental touch charged with possibility. You try to recreate it on the second date, same cafe, same table, same drinks, and yet it feels slightly different. The magic elusive. The heart remembers the first spark and craves its exact replication. But connection is not a formula. It deepens, it shifts, it asks for evolution. To demand the first time again is to miss the miracle of what comes after. The recipe. Replication failure is a reminder that control has limits. We cling to instructions, recipes, manuals, life plans, because they promise predictability. But the world resists replication. Every moment is unrepeatable, every taste a combination of shifting factors, every experience both familiar and strange. To try to pin it down is to chase smoke. Even in science, replication falters. Psychologists call it the replication crisis, where studies repeated under the same conditions yield different results. Tiny, invisible differences accumulate, changing outcomes. This isn't just a flaw in science, it's a law of existence. No two moments are ever perfectly the same, but here lies the beauty hidden in the frustration. The failure to replicate invites us to notice the present. Instead of chasing the first time, you can savor this time. Instead of mourning the missing spark, you can recognize the subtle differences. The brighter lemon note, the deeper roast, the unexpected sweetness. You can let go of the illusion that perfection lies in repetition and discover that richness lies in variation. Cooking itself is testimony to this. The best chefs don't cling to recipes like rigid codes. They adjust, taste, respond. They know that the onion today is not the onion of yesterday, that the pan's heat whispers differently each night. The recipe is a guide, not a guarantee. To cook is to dance with imperfection, to accept that each attempt is unique, and that uniqueness is what makes it alive. Life, too, resists perfect replication. You cannot return to the childhood vacation that seemed infinite, the friendship that felt like forever, the first success that shimmered with pride. You can visit the same places, see the same faces, do the same steps, but the taste will not be the same, because you are not the same. The self shifts like the seasons, carrying new expectations, new hungers, new shadows. So, the paradox is not failure at all, it is revelation. It reveals that what you loved the first time was not just the thing itself, but the collision of the thing and the unrepeatable moment. To chase it forever is to be disappointed, but to accept the shifting flavor is to be free. The dish may not taste like it did before, but it tastes like now, and now is the only meal ever truly served. The recipe didn't betray you, it kept its promise. It gave you a frame, a structure, a set of instructions. What changed was life itself, slipping between the lines, altering the flavor, reminding you that nothing, no dish, no song, no love, no moment, can be summoned back exactly as it was. You can follow the recipe exactly and still find difference, because difference is the secret ingredient the universe always adds. And maybe that's the point. If every repetition were identical, discovery would vanish. Magic requires mystery. The first taste would be the last taste worth having. By denying us perfect replication, life keeps us awake, alert, tasting not just for what was, but for what is becoming. So next time your dish betrays you, next time your memory outshines the present, don't despair. Pause, taste slowly, and remember, you are not meant to repeat the first time, you are meant to live this one. Tangled wire mystery. You place them carefully as if handling something fragile. The wires are coiled neatly, folded with intention, tucked away to ensure order. You convince yourself this time will be different, that when you return, they will emerge just as you left them, smooth, obedient, ready. But when you pull them from your pocket or your bag, they appear transformed. Loops have twisted into knots. Ends have wrapped around themselves in ways that seem to defy geometry, as if unseen hands worked to weave chaos from order. You stare at them, baffled, tugging at the snarled mess, wondering how neatness could unravel into this impossible tangle. This is the tangled wire mystery, a paradox that reaches far beyond cables and headphones, into the deeper structure of how chaos seems to emerge from every corner of life. At first glance, it feels like sabotage. You imagine the wires conspiring in darkness, knotting themselves when you're not looking. But the truth is stranger. Mathematicians have studied this phenomenon, and the results are unsettling. In experiments where cords are shaken randomly inside a box, knots appear naturally, without intent, in patterns of startling consistency. The longer the wire, the more certain the knots. Entropy itself, nature's drift toward disorder, seems to prefer tangling. What you perceive as a personal failure is actually the universe's silent law. Order requires effort, while chaos arises on its own. This is why the knots feel impossible. They are not deliberate, they are emergent. The moment you set wires free in a pocket or a bag, random motion takes over. Small loops slip into larger ones, friction locks them into place, and before long, you have a knot you could swear no human hand created. The neatness you began with was fragile, temporary, almost unnatural. The tangle is not the aberration, the tangle is the default. But the mystery runs deeper because it mirrors the human experience. Think of your daily life. You try to arrange everything neatly, tasks scheduled, goals aligned, relationships ordered. Yet despite your effort, life emerges in knots. Miscommunications twist into arguments, plans derail, responsibilities overlap. The harder you try to keep things perfectly smooth, the more impossible tangles appear, as if existence itself conspires toward complication. The tangled wire. Mystery is not just about headphones. It is about why chaos feels inevitable, why simplicity resists permanence. And the paradox grows sharper when you notice this. The more you struggle against the knots, the tighter they become. You pull at one end of the wire, and the tangle cinches tighter. You rush to undo it, and the loops harden into stubborn shapes. Patience, not force, is the only way out. The knot yields not to aggression, but to careful attention. In this, the wire teaches us a quiet truth. Problems are not undone by panic, but by slowing down, by seeing clearly where each loop connects, by working through entanglement with presence rather than frustration. There is even something poetic in it. The knots remind us that life is not meant to unfold in straight, predictable lines. Just as a tangled cord seems to have lived a secret life when you weren't watching, your own path twists and loops in ways you never planned. The knots are frustrating, yes, but they are also evidence of movement, of contact, of existence. A perfectly straight wire would mean nothing happened. Nothing touched it. Nothing lived around it. And so, the tangled wire mystery is more than an inconvenience. It is a metaphor for existence itself. Order is fleeting, chaos inevitable. What matters is not avoiding the tangle, but learning how to meet it when it comes, to pull gently instead of harshly, to see the hidden paths within the loops, to recognize that knots are not signs of failure, but of life unfolding in its unpredictable ways. The next time you reach into your pocket and pull out a hopelessly tangled cord, notice what it is teaching you. You tried to preserve order, and the universe handed you complexity. You tried to keep things smooth, and reality gave you loops. But hidden in that frustration is a strange kind of wisdom, that life, like wires, was never meant to stay neatly coiled. It was always meant to twist, knot, and unravel, and for you to find your way patiently through its impossible shapes. The weekends speed up. You wait for it all week. The weekend, those 2 golden days that seem to shine in your imagination like a promise. You count down the hours of Friday, feeling lighter as the clock moves toward evening. You picture the freedom, the long stretches of rest, the chance to do everything you couldn't during the work week. And then, suddenly, it's Sunday night. The weekend evaporates like a dream you can't quite hold on to, slipping through your fingers before you even understood it had begun. 2 days of rest vanish in what feels like minutes, while 2 days of work can stretch endlessly, dragging like chains across the floor of time. Why is it that leisure runs fast and obligation runs slow? Why do 2 days of freedom collapse into a blur, while 2 days of labor seem like an eternity? This is the weekend speed up, a paradox that reveals not just how we experience time, but how time itself bends to the weight of meaning. When we are at work, trapped in repetition, time stretches painfully. Every second drips with awareness. Every glance at the clock reminds you of the hours still left to endure. Workdays are filled with enforced waiting, with tasks that hold no intrinsic joy, with a steady awareness of the distance between you and freedom. That awareness slows everything down. But when the weekend arrives, the awareness flips. Suddenly you're free, immersed in moments that feel alive, meeting friends, watching films, sleeping in, wandering without structure. And when the mind is full, time disappears. You only realize it has passed once it's gone. Psychologists describe this as a function of memory density. Boring days feel long while you live them, but short in memory. Exciting days feel short while you live them, but long in memory. That's why childhood summers seemed endless when you were inside them, and yet now feel like flashes of light in recollection. The weekend collapses in real time because you are immersed, distracted, alive. But it lingers more richly in memory than a single Monday could ever hope to. The irony is brutal. The moments you most want to savor feel fastest in the present and longest in the past. The moments you most want to escape feel longest in the present and shortest in the past. Think of a Friday evening where you promised yourself endless freedom, an entire movie marathon, time to read, time to finally call that old friend. You blink, and it's 1 a.m. Saturday. You sleep late, meaning half the day is gone before it begins. By Sunday afternoon, anxiety creeps in. The shadow of Monday day already stretching across your mind. Leisure becomes haunted by obligation, and suddenly the hours collapse even faster. Meanwhile, the 2 days of work you endured just before, those dragged like weights. Each hour was long enough to feel like 3. Together, this creates a cruel imbalance. The scales of time are tilted not by the clock, but by your own perception of meaning and desire. The weekend speed up isn't just an inconvenience. It is a mirror of the human condition. We are always chasing freedom, yet freedom itself slips away the fastest. Oh, we stretch under obligation, yet obligation leaves nothing worth remembering. And in this tension, time itself becomes biased, racing when you want it to pause, crawling when you want it to end. Isn't it strange that the clock on the wall ticks the same way on Saturday as it does on Tuesday? Yet in your body, the rhythm is entirely different. Time is not equal. It bends to attention, to desire, to the texture of experience. And perhaps that's the quiet cruelty of modern life. The system gives you 5 days owned by others and 2 days that feel like half a breath. and then it asks you to repeat again and again until years blur into decades. No wonder people dream of retirement, or of vacations, or of lives less divided between the slow and the fast. They are really dreaming of time itself being returned to them, of days that do not vanish or drag, but simply exist. Yet, there is also something profound hidden in the speed up. If time accelerates when you are fully alive, perhaps that's not a punishment but a clue. Perhaps the fleeting sensation is the price of meaning. The moments you love will always feel fast because they are rich, overflowing, impossible to contain. The hours you dread will always feel slow because they are hollow, stretched thin, resistant to life. The lesson may not be how to stop weekends from racing by, but how to infuse the rest of your life with the same intensity, so that even weekdays carry the blur of immersion instead of the drag of waiting. The weekend speed up reminds us that time is not a neutral container, but a living force shaped by our own perception. 2 days of work and 2 days of rest may be equal on the clock, but in the mind, they are galaxies apart. And maybe the only way to resist the illusion is not to demand that time slow down, but to inhabit it so fully that even its speed feels like a gift. Email, urgency, inversion. There is a quiet strangeness that lurks in the rhythm of digital communication. You send an email marked urgent, heavy with deadlines, layered with importance. You watch the screen, waiting for the reply that must surely come quickly. Hours pass, a day, silence. Meanwhile, a different email arrives. Trivial, unnecessary, barely worth the subject line. And almost instantly, it receives a response. The paradox emerges. The more urgent the message, the longer it waits. The more trivial the content, the faster it is answered. This is the email urgency inversion, an everyday mystery that reveals the strange logic of human attention. On the surface, it makes no sense. Shouldn't urgency demand priority? Shouldn't the weight of importance accelerate response, not delay it? Yet again and again the pattern repeats. The serious waits, the shallow leaps ahead. It feels like the rules of communication are reversed, like the universe itself plays tricks through the medium of the inbox. Part of the explanation lies in psychology. Urgent emails carry weight, and with weight comes resistance. The recipient sees the subject line, feels the pressure, and instinctively postpones. To reply to urgency demands focus, decision, responsibility. It cannot be done casually. And so, it is delayed. By contrast, the trivial email asks almost nothing. It can be dispatched quickly, replied to with minimal thought. And so, the mind, seeking relief, chooses the path of least resistance. The easy is done first, the heavy is left to linger. The inbox becomes not a system of importance, but a map of avoidance. But there is something more unsettling here. Because when you are the sender, the inversion feels personal. It feels as if your urgency has been ignored, your need dismissed, your presence devalued. You wonder if the silence is intentional, if the weight of your message has driven it not to the front of the line, but to the very back. You begin to see communication not as clarity, but as distortion, where the signal you send is never received as you intended. And in that distortion, trust erodes. Think of how often this pattern extends beyond email. Urgent texts go unanswered while memes receive instant replies. Pressing questions are ignored while meaningless chatter is indulged. Even in conversations, the topics that matter most are the hardest to voice, the hardest to receive. The serious is delayed, the trivial is embraced. The email urgency inversion is not confined to inboxes. It is a reflection of how human beings, overwhelmed by the gravity of responsibility, retreat into the comfort of the small and the inconsequential. And yet, there is something deeper still. The inversion reveals how fragile our systems of communication really are. We assume that importance will naturally draw attention, that urgency will summon response. But in reality, attention is not guided by logic. It is guided by energy. What we answer quickly is not what matters most, but what costs us the least. The trivial survives because it demands little. The urgent suffers because it demands everything. And so, the very signals designed to mark importance backfire, ensuring delay instead of speed. There is also a strange irony in the inversion. The more important the message, the more carefully it must be answered. And the more carefully it must be answered, the longer it takes. Importance breeds hesitation. Hesitation breeds delay. By contrast, Triviality thrives because it asks for no depth, no thought. It is answered immediately because it does not matter. And in this way, urgency ensures its own neglect, while irrelevance ensures its own survival. The email urgency inversion also reflects the way modern life bends under the weight of overload. Every inbox is a battlefield of signals, each one demanding attention, each one competing for space in a finite mind. In such a world, importance becomes a burden. Triviality becomes relief. And so, we see a strange kind of self-defense. Respond to what is light, ignore what is heavy. The inversion is not just about communication. It is about survival in an age of endless demand. But perhaps the inversion holds a lesson too. It teaches us that urgency is not always a guarantee of response. That importance, left unshared or unbalanced, can collapse under its own weight. It reminds us that if we want to be heard, we must think not only of what we send, but of how it is received. Not only of importance, but of timing, energy, and the fragile human being at the other end of the line. There is a paradoxical beauty in this, unsettling as it may be. It suggests that communication is not purely logical, not purely mechanical. It is human, messy, emotional. It bends under moods, under fatigue, under hidden fears of failure. The inbox is not a machine. It is a mirror of the human mind, with all its contradictions and evasions. The email urgency inversion is not failure, but reflection. It reveals not just how we answer emails, but how we face the demands of life itself, avoiding the heavy, embracing the light. So the next time you find your urgent message unanswered, pause. Notice the inversion. Recognize that silence does not always mean neglect, and speed does not always mean importance. Understand that the inbox is not a perfect system, but a battlefield of human limitations. And perhaps, in that recognition, find patience. Because one day when the burden lifts, the urgent will be answered. It always is. Not when you demand it, but when the rhythm of human attention finally allows it. The inversion unsettles because it breaks our expectation of order. But perhaps its real lesson is this. Life itself is not ordered by urgency. What is loud is not always heard. What is important is not always immediate. And what is trivial may sometimes move fastest of all. Last drop resistance. You turn the bottle upside down, shake it, tap it, squeeze it, tilt it at every angle possible. But no matter how hard you try, the last drop refuses to come out. It clings to the inside, stubborn and unmoving, as if mocking your effort. You bought it, you used it, you came this far. Yet, just before the finish, you're denied the closure you expect. This is the last drop resistance, the strange truth that sometimes the final part is the hardest to reach, even when you've already come so close. At first, it feels trivial. A bottle of shampoo, a tube of toothpaste, a carton of milk. The last drop is small, almost insignificant. But the frustration it creates reveals something deeper. Why do we care so much about squeezing out every last bit? Why does the unfinished remnant bother us more than the entire product we've already used? It is not about the drop. It is about the principle. The unfinished thing nags at us. The unreachable remainder becomes a symbol. It whispers that we are never able to complete, never able to fully consume, never able to truly finish what we start. Psychologists might call this the completion bias, our deep craving for closure. We don't like loose ends, unfinished tasks, unresolved endings. Our minds yearn for the clean satisfaction of totality. And so, when the last drop resists, it feels larger than it is. It becomes a reminder that even in the small things, completion is elusive. You can drink 99% of the bottle, but the stubborn remainder denies you the satisfaction of 100. And isn't this how life itself often feels? You work for years toward a project, and the final stretch is the hardest. You run a long race, and the last mile burns the most. You repair a relationship, and the final words of forgiveness stick in your throat. The last drop is always where resistance gathers. The beginning is exciting, the middle is manageable, but the ending, that is where inertia grows heavy. Because endings carry weight, they demand release. They require letting go, and letting go is never easy. Think of the way we cling to the last moments of a vacation. The bags are packed, the tickets are ready, yet we find ourselves staring out the window, aching to prolong the view. Or the way we cling to the final minutes with someone we love, stretching out the goodbye, resisting the truth that parting has already arrived. The last drop is never about quantity, It is about meaning. It is the place where we wrestle with the finality of things, the stubborn truth that nothing lasts forever. The illusion is that the last drop should be easy. After all, the hardest work has already been done. But in reality, the final step is often the most difficult. Authors struggle not with beginnings, but with endings. Students stumble not in starting assignments, but in finishing them. Even in life, the earliest years are filled with energy, but the later years often carry the heaviest resistance. Not because the path is long, but because the end is near. The last drop reminds us that closure is a weight the human heart resists bearing. And yet, sometimes the last drop cannot be extracted at all. No matter how you shake, squeeze, or tilt, it remains trapped. What do we do then? Do we rage at the waste, or do we accept the truth, that completion is often imperfect, that there will always be remnants, fragments, parts unfinished, words unsaid? The last drop teaches us a hidden wisdom, that perfection is an illusion, and that sometimes the only way to move forward is to accept what remains unfinished. There is a strange freedom in this, to realize that the last drop does not define the whole bottle, that the unspoken word does not erase the love behind it, that the unfinished dream does not erase the journey it inspired. Perhaps the last drop resists not to frustrate us, but to remind us that life will never give us everything, that there will always be a little left undone, a little left unsaid, a little left behind. But there is another way to see it. Sometimes the last drop requires not force, but patience. It emerges not from shaking harder, but from waiting longer, from letting gravity do its quiet work. And maybe that too is a lesson, that not every ending is meant to be forced. Some are meant to arrive in their own time. The harder we demand closure, the more it resists. But when we release the demand, the final drop sometimes falls on its own. So, the next time you struggle with the last drop, whether in a bottle, a task, or a moment in life, pause. Ask yourself, am I clinging out of need or out of refusal to let go? Am I demanding perfection, or can I accept the imperfect finish? Because sometimes the deepest wisdom is not in forcing the last drop out, but in learning to live without it. In the end, the last drop resistance is a mirror of existence itself. We chase completeness, but life offers only fragments. We seek finality, but life flows in cycles. We demand the whole, but life gives us enough, and leaves some behind. And maybe that is not failure, but design. Because if every drop could be extracted, if every ending could be perfect, perhaps we would stop appreciating the beauty of the in-between. The bottle is not defined by the drop you cannot reach. Your life is not defined by the parts you cannot finish. The beauty is in what you did have, what you did live, what you did experience. And the last drop, resisting you, reminds you that no matter how much you strive, there will always be something beyond your grasp. And that is not despair, it is mystery. Plant watering guesswork. You lean over the plant, its leaves drooping, its color fading, its silence accusing. You wonder if you failed it with excess love or with neglect. Was it thirst that curled the leaves inward, or was it drowning that softened the roots into rot? You water it again, unsure if this is rescue or execution. You wait days, watching, hoping, doubting. The plant remains silent, refusing to confess. You never know if it died from too much water or not enough. This is the plant watering guesswork, and it extends far beyond pots of soil and window sills. It is the puzzle of care itself, the difficulty of knowing when nurture becomes harm and when withholding becomes neglect. Because plants, like people, rarely hand us clear feedback. They speak in delayed signals, leaves yellowing, stems sagging, but by the time the message is visible, the cause is already buried in the past. Was it last week's drought? Yesterday's flood? Both? The signs blur, and you are left with doubt. In truth, this paradox echoes in every form of care. Think of parenting. A child grows quiet and withdrawn. Is it because you gave too much attention, suffocating them with your worry? Or too little, leaving them to feel unseen? You try to adjust, but the signals are slow, the response is ambiguous. You never know if you are smothering or starving the roots of trust. Think of love. A partner pulls away and you ask yourself, did I call too often or not enough? Did I hold too tightly or not tightly enough? Love, like a plant, rarely offers immediate feedback. What you think is kindness may register as control. What you think is space may register as indifference. You only learn the truth in hindsight, after something has withered. Think of work. A leader manages a team, unsure whether their guidance is overbearing or their distance is neglect. Too many check-ins, and the team feels micromanaged. Too few, and they feel abandoned. The results take months to surface, and by then it's unclear which side of the line you fell on. The plant watering guesswork reveals the fragile nature of balance. Care is not a fixed formula. It is a shifting dance between presence and absence. Too much, and you choke the roots. Too little, and they dry. And the cruelest part is that the line moves constantly. What was nourishing yesterday may be harmful today. What a plant needs in summer is not what it needs in winter. What a person needs in joy is not what they need in grief. The deeper lesson here is humility. To care for anything, plant, child, partner, friend, is to admit that you do not control outcomes. You influence, you guess, you respond, but you cannot guarantee. The plant may die despite your best effort, and you will never know for certain why. And maybe that uncertainty is not a failure, but a teacher, reminding you that life resists perfect equations. In psychology, they call this the problem of delayed feedback. Systems that respond slowly create confusion. By the time you see the result, the cause has shifted. You water a plant, and only days later do you see the effect. By then, you may have already watered again, compounding the error. Life works this way too. Decisions ripple forward in ways you can't trace. Consequences surface long after causes are forgotten. We live in feedback loops too slow for clarity. So what do we do with this uncertainty? We learn to observe with patience, to listen more deeply, to resist the urge to overcorrect. Sometimes the best care is not constant action, but attunement, watching, sensing, waiting. Care is not measured only in what you give, but in your willingness to pause before giving. But there is another truth. Sometimes, despite all guessing, plants still die, relationships end, friendships fade, projects collapse, and we torture ourselves with the same question. Did I give too much or not enough? Or was it water or drought that ended it? And often, the real answer is that it was not about you at all. The soil was already weak. The roots were already fragile. The plant's story was not one you could rewrite. The paradox, then, is not just about plants, but about life itself. We crave certainty in the act of care, but certainty never arrives. We water, we wait, we wonder. We love, we try, we hope. And sometimes what we offer saves, sometimes it harms, sometimes it simply passes through, unnoticed, because the ending was written in other causes beyond our reach. And perhaps the lesson hidden here is this. The goal is not to always get it right. The goal is to show up with presence, to try, to risk being wrong, to accept that care will sometimes miss its mark, but the act of trying is what keeps us human. So, the next time you stand over a wilting plant, coins of water trembling in your hand, remember, the question too much or too little may never be answered. What matters is that you are here, willing to try, willing to learn, willing to live inside the uncertainty that is care, because care, like water, is never perfect. It is only ever offered, and offering is enough. DIY tool hunt. You know the irony well. A project sparks in your mind. Fixing a shelf, repairing a loose hinge, starting a craft you've been meaning to do for months. You prepare yourself with diligence. You go out and buy the tools you'll need, setting them aside carefully, almost proudly. You imagine the moment of beginning, everything ready, no excuses, no delays. But then, when the day finally arrives and you stand before the project, you cannot find them. The hammer you bought last week, the screwdriver set still in its packaging, the measuring tape you swore was on the counter, gone. You search drawers, closets, boxes, retracing your steps as if unraveling a crime scene. The project remains untouched, while the tools meant to build it become the very obstacle in your way. This is the DIY tool hunt, a paradox of preparation turning into disappearance. At its heart, this loop exposes a strange feature of human psychology, the illusion of readiness. We convince ourselves that buying the tools is itself a form of progress. The act feels productive, walking the aisles, selecting the right set, carrying them home. It satisfies the brain's craving for movement toward a goal, but because the tools aren't immediately used, they enter a liminal space. They are no longer part of the store, but not yet part of the work. In that in-between, they vanish into the clutter of everyday life. Consider how memory plays a role. When you first set the tools down, you likely did so with the thought, I'll remember this spot. But memory is not a faithful recorder. It is context dependent. The state of mind in which you place the tools is not the state of mind in which you search for them later. Stress changes recall. Motivation changes recall. What once felt obvious becomes elusive. This is why people often find lost items in plain sight, sitting where they looked dozens of times. The object never moved, but their attention did. The paradox runs deeper because the very preparation creates distance. The longer the gap between acquiring the tools and starting the project, the more invisible the tools become. They sink into the background of your environment, camouflaged by familiarity. You stop noticing them, just as you stop noticing the pictures on your walls or the shoes by your door. The tools are there, but in psychological terms, they become habituated noise. Only when you no longer need them will they suddenly reappear, mocking you with their obviousness. And beyond psychology lies the metaphor. The DIY tool hunt mirrors how we prepare for life itself. We gather resources, knowledge, money, connections, skills, believing we will use them when the moment arrives. But when that moment comes, we feel unready. The very things we thought we secured seem distant, misplaced, hidden from reach. Like the tools, our preparations scatter into the clutter of time. We mistake readiness for possession, when readiness is actually presence. This spiral reveals a truth about human existence. Projects don't fail for lack of tools, but for lack of alignment between intention and action. Owning the screwdriver doesn't build the shelf. Having the book doesn't mean the knowledge is absorbed. Buying the instrument doesn't mean the music is played. The tools vanish not because they are gone, but because we delay transforming them from symbols into use. And perhaps there is something deeper here. Life itself is a kind of tool hunt. We search for meaning, for purpose, for clarity, but often overlook the fact that what we need is already near us, hidden in plain sight, waiting to be noticed. The frustration of misplaced tools is not just about the drawer or the closet. It is about the way we scatter our attention, the way we hold our lives in fragments rather than coherence. So, the next time you stand before an untouched project, paralyzed not by difficulty but by the absence of the tools you swore you had, recognize the loop. The tools are not gone. They are hidden within the noise of your own preparation. And in that recognition lies the deeper lesson, that progress is not in acquiring but in using, not in preparing but in beginning, not in owning the tool but in holding it at the moment you truly need it. The unsent message. You sit in the dim glow of your phone, words pouring out of you like a confession. Every sentence feels precise, every phrase shaped by the weight of everything you couldn't say aloud. You craft it carefully, this message that is more than text. It's a piece of your heart, compressed into digital lines. You reread it once, twice, 3 times, fine-tuning commas and pauses, as if perfection could make it safer to release. And then you hesitate. Your thumb hovers over send, but something stops you. Maybe fear, maybe doubt, maybe the faint voice whispering that timing is everything. You save it. You leave it. And then hours pass. A day passes. The moment dissolves. When you return, the words feel like fossils. Sending them now would make no sense at all. This is the haunting paradox of the unsent message. It is alive when you write it, pulsing with urgency. But the longer it waits, the faster it dies. Communication has its own strange clock. What makes sense in one moment becomes incomprehensible in the next. The joke you typed in the heat of laughter feels flat when delivered later. The anger you captured at midnight cools by morning, leaving only awkward residue. The confession you couldn't bring yourself to send becomes irrelevant once the silence hardens. The message remains unsent, but the feelings remain inside you, transformed by time into something heavier, something lonelier. Psychologically, this is about the decay of context. A conversation is not just words, it's tone, timing, atmosphere. When you delay, you lose the invisible scaffolding that gives those words meaning. Imagine trying to deliver a punchline hours after the setup. The rhythm is gone. Imagine apologizing days after the mistake. The sincerity feels delayed, diluted. Imagine sending in "I miss you" when the other person has already moved on to a different emotional season. The unsent message is not simply late, it is stripped of the moment it was born in. And without that moment, it becomes something else entirely. But here's the deeper wound. Sometimes the message was never meant to be sent. Sometimes writing it is the act itself, the release. You type not to communicate, but to exercise. The unsent draft becomes a graveyard of feelings too raw to expose, a secret dialogue between you and the person you'll never truly face. And yet, that silence can be as loud as any message delivered, because the words unsent still shape you. They haunt you. You scroll through the drafts folder like a museum of all the selves you almost revealed. Think of how many lives are quietly rewritten by messages that never left the screen. The apology that could have repaired a bond. The declaration of love that might have changed everything. The truth that remained hidden because the timing wasn't right. These moments live only as ghosts, possibilities that dissolve into nothing. And what's cruel is that you will never know what would have happened if you had pressed send. The unsent message locks you into a paradox. Regret for what you didn't say, relief for what you didn't risk, and the eternal question of which was truer. Isn't it haunting that in the digital age, where words can travel instantly across the world, the heaviest weight still lies in the words we never deliver? That silence, chosen or accidental, still has the power to shape entire relationships. Sometimes silence protects, sometimes it destroys, but it always lingers. And yet, there is a strange beauty here too. The unsent message teaches us that not all words are meant for others. Some are meant for ourselves, as proof that we felt something real, even if we never shared it. Perhaps the act of writing is its own form of release, a ritual of honesty that doesn't require an audience. In that way, the unsent message is not failure, but testament, evidence of the storms that passed silently through you. So the next time you hover over send and decide not to, know that the moment will vanish and the words will fade, but also know that their echo remains in you, in memory, in the unseen architecture of your relationships. Because sometimes the most powerful messages are not the ones we send, but the ones that remain forever unsent, alive only in the space between what we felt and what the world will never know.